Yo, what's up? My name's Patrouski, and raids are now within PokeMMO. Well, kinda. You see, they've been being beta tested over the past few years, appearing for a limited period of time, usually for around 14 to 15 days during the holiday events, aka the Halloween event, the Christmas event, and the Lunar New Year event. However, raids should be permanently releasing at some point here in the future within PokeMMO, hopefully within the next year or two. I'm banking on the next year, but we don't really know that for sure. But you want to make sure that when raids fully release or when they return for the Halloween event in this upcoming year in 2025, you want to be prepared and have as many raid Pokemon made as possible. Raids are difficult in PokeMMO, and every single raid usually needs a somewhat different strategy. They've taken the opportunity to create some really interesting PvM and require players bring really specific Pokemon to counter things, such as the move Gravity, which isn't traditionally used very much in the traditional storyline or in PvP. We see a lot of really cool utility moves in raids, things like Haze, Quash, Defog, lots of Tailwind, and then lots of high damage, lots of DPS fights. At the moment, I would argue that raids, more than anything, are a DPS slugfest, and you want to have the proper team with the proper synergies to be able to do enough damage as possible to kill the raid Pokemon before they kill you. So let's go ahead and jump into every single raid Pokemon that you could possibly build within PokeMMO, some more important than others, and I'll explain why. You see, not all raid Pokemon are built equal, so I have two boxes that I want to show you guys today. Core raid Pokemon, which are much more fundamental and can help you beat a lot more of the current raids that exist, or at least do exist during those limited periods of time. And we also have experimental raiders. So we have a lot of Pokemon to cover today, as you can see. And obviously, you don't need to build all of these. If anything, you only really need to build maybe 6 to 12 Pokemon. I think if you have 6 to 12 Pokemon built, you're going to be able to do 99.9% of raids. A lot of the experimental stuff is honestly stuff that isn't very good right now in raids, but could be very good in the future. So that's going to be its own later half separate part of the video essentially. But the core raiders, these have all been Pokemon that have been good at previous raids in the past, which really shows how dynamic raids can be in PokeMMO. And PokeMMO is an MMO, and in MMOs, it's always been the case that preparation equals success. Preparation is so important. This game is a marathon, not a sprint. Taking time to create your raid Pokemon now, before they're actually out, is going to help players get a massive leg up on the players who didn't prepare. I also need to quickly give a shout out over to To Jejgunz, who is one of the best raiders I've ever seen within PokeMMO. To Jejgunz was a player who was the first to beat multiple different raids within PokeMMO, which is a massive achievement, and I've always been an advocate that server firsts like that should be shouted out to the heavens, and people should know your name if you put in that effort to really develop those strategies from the ground up. And unfortunately, I have to share the sad news that To Jejgunz has decided to quit the game, which is always unfortunate to see, but hopefully maybe one day he comes back, or he goes on to enjoy whatever games he enjoys from this point forward, or wherever else he finds success, which I'm sure he will in life. But thanks to To Jejgunz generously donating all of his raid Pokemon over to me, which I kind of told him not to do in DMs. I was like, hey man, I really appreciate it, but I'd rather you keep them just in case that one day you come back to the game. I'd rather you have your raid Pokemon. But he was insistent about it, and he went ahead and mailed me all of these Pokemon. And because of that, because of Jedge, I can now do a video covering all of these Pokemon. So it's a huge privilege, and this video wouldn't be possible without him. Also, I genuinely don't need all of these Pokemon, and box space is really important to me as a shiny hunter. So if you want to see what I plan to do with all of these Pokemon, you might want to see to the end of the video. And as always, if you find this video helpful, please make sure to leave a like on it. It only takes one click, 1 second, and it helps me tremendously. And also subscribing if you want to see daily PokeMMO videos. That one's really up to you. If you don't want to see daily videos every day, I understand. Not everybody loves this game as much as I do, or as much as some players do. It's totally understandable, but click it if you want to, and follow me on Twitch for streams Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. ET, all that jazz. I'm going to stop stalling for content. Let's go ahead and jump into the top raid Pokemon you guys should build first. This list isn't going to be in any sort of exact order, but I'll be trying my best to cover, for example, the Fire/Sun team, which is easily the most important team you should build in PokeMMO for raids at the start, and then we'll kind of get down to the more niche stuff as we go on. But everything I'll be covering from this timestamp, and there should be timestamps on the video, everything I'll be covering from this point forward is going to be what I consider core raiders, but not all core raiders are built equal, keep in mind. If you just want to build the 6 to 12 Pokemon or so, then I strongly encourage you to build a Sun team and then a Fighting type Pokemon team, as these two teams are usually able to take on 95% of raids. All right, so let's break it down. Typically on a Sun team, you end up with 2 utility Pokemon and then 4 DPS mons. I'm going to cover the utility Pokemon first, and we'll go ahead and go through like each tiers and stuff like that, and just other options as well. You could run other options in these DPS sections, and we'll get to that in a quick sec. But let's first start off with utility Pokemon. So we have our Prankster Tailwind Murkrow over here, and then our Drought Ninetales over here. Those are the most important things about these Pokemon. Now, if we scroll through, you can go ahead and see the natures that have been gone here. We'll go ahead and see the overall stats, which can be relevant for certain speeds on certain raids. Usually for item slot on a Murkrow, you would go something like Rocky Helmet. You could do that. You could do Mental Herb if the raid tries to taunt you in some way. But I would say more than anything, I usually go Rocky Helmet on the Murkrow just to get some extra chip damage. Here's what the EVs look like on these two Pokemon. And I want to remind you guys, this Murkrow is from a top tier raider within PokeMMO. So he's a really good example to show you guys that good IVs and good EVs and good stats are overrated, okay? The most important thing when it comes to PokeMMO PvM is strategy and good decisions, okay? As you can see here, he just has 252 speed on this thing, and that's it. And this is kind of optimal. Gone are the days of going Eviolite, sassy, tanky Murkrow. Don't look at my boxes because I definitely have one of those when that was the meta. Nowadays, you kind of just want a Murkrow with speed, and that's it. And Prankster is going to make up for most of, you don't even really need that a lot of the time. Prankster is going to make up for most of it, but just in case, in a worst case scenario, if abilities are turned off or there's some problem, you want to be able to rely on your speed. So Murkrow honestly is one of the few Pokemon that doesn't really need any stats for raids. You could go in with a 6x0 Murkrow with Prankster Tailwind and do absolutely fine. Now, there might be a few raids where a tanky Murkrow is actually more ideal, but those are kind of far and in between. Nowadays, you usually just want 1 out of the 4 people doing the raid to lead with Murkrow, set up Tailwind, and then the rest do DPS. Murkrow is probably the most, single most important raid Pokemon that you can build. It's the #1 utility Pokemon. You see it has so much access to so many different utility moves, as you can see here, all which get boosted by the Prankster ability, which allow it to go first and get priority. And Murkrow's main job is just to set up Tailwind and usually die, sometimes having one in the back for one of these different utility moves depending on the specific fight. But almost every single raid team you create will have a Murkrow. Now, I will say for solo queuing, things get a little bit more difficult, and that's where this video becomes difficult, because I'll mostly be talking about coordinated play because it's what I do and it's what I recommend. I really don't recommend players solo queue for raids in PokeMMO. What you can do to avoid solo queuing if you aren't in a team or maybe don't have friends on your friends list for whatever reason, you can head over to my Discord or the PokeMMO official Discord or any Discord that revolves around this game and look for players of a like mind with a decent team built who are looking to complete raids. You can work with those players, you can communicate, you can make new friends, you can join a new team, and socializing is a big part of MMOs, and you can avoid it a lot in PokeMMO, but raids are kind of a social thing. You really do have to coordinate and work with other players, at least if you want to succeed at the highest level. If you want to just solo queue, obviously you can, but it'll be a lot tougher. But the reason I bring this up is because one of the #1 problems I see in solo queue, which it's not really solvable, is the unfortunate problem of it. Too many people bring too many utility Pokemon. What happens a lot in solo queue is people are lacking DPS because everybody brings a Murkrow. Not everybody needs to bring a Murkrow, only one person, right? If all 4 people lead a Murkrow and they all use Tailwind, you wasted 3 Tailwinds essentially. It doesn't increase the speed more. It doesn't, last for longer. It's just a wasted turn for 3 people. So if only one person brings Tailwind and then the others just DPS, you're going to have a much better chance at winning. But that's an unfortunately, it's really tough to solve that with solo queue raids without some sort of better system coming down the road or encouraging people to once again group up via Discords and just make friends along the way. But next up, let's go ahead and talk about Ninetales. You can put choice specs on Ninetales, Charcoal, choice specs, Fire Gem. I might do a whole separate video covering items for raids because, that can get really complicated. You actually use quite a fair bit of items since there is something called the item clause whenever you're doing raids, as well as the species clause. So you can't just put 6 choice specs on all of your Pokemon. You only get 1 choice spec per fight, per team rather. And then there's also species clause, so I can't just go Drought Ninetales and then 5 eruption Typhlosions. That wouldn't work. I have to have, a different species of Pokemon. But Ninetales' main job is to go ahead and set up Drought. So you do need hidden ability access on your Ninetales. That is absolutely crucial. If you're breeding a Ninetales, buying a Ninetales, getting a Ninetales in some way for the raids, make sure it has hidden ability access. It does not need to be an alpha Ninetales like this one, but it does need to have hidden ability access. And then Ninetales' biggest struggle is doing enough damage before it dies. You really do want to invest into a mild, modest, or rash Ninetales. 252 special attack EVs is a must, as well as speed here, and then you want to have a high special attack IV. Now 25 plus is probably good enough, but as high the special attack IV as you can get is really the better. The defenses and stuff, with most Pokemon I talked about today, generally what you're going to want is 25 plus in one of the attacks, whichever attack it utilizes, since most Pokemon aren't mixed attackers, aka a Pokemon that utilizes both attack and special attack. Like Ninetales here is just utilizing special attack, so you want 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in special defense, and HP. The other attack is usually irrelevant. That's how you want to stat most of, like 99% of the Pokemon that I talked about today. Obviously, the more defenses, the better. As you can see, this Ninetales is 25 plus, but don't stress over it. It's not going to be that relevant most of the time in raids. If anything, a lot of the time, you'd rather your Ninetales die just to be able to bring in a better DPS mon to get more DPS off faster. Now, every single raid in PokeMMO has something called a damage cap, which limits how much damage you can do within one attack against that raid boss. So when I say, like, okay, you want to try to make sure your Ninetales is hitting as close to damage cap as possible, that's what I mean. Certain raids will allow you to do 7.5% damage per attack. Certain raids will only allow you to do 6%. The really difficult raids will cap out at like 4% at times. Those are the really tough ones. It can just happen. Different tiers of raids will have different damage caps. So something you'll notice me say is usually you don't want to put a choice specs on something like a Typhlosion, because eruption on Typhlosion is already hitting the damage cap. It's already doing so much damage that you're wasting your item slot by putting specs on it. Usually you want to put specs over on your weakest dealing damage Pokemon to try to get it closer to that damage cap. So usually you would put specs on something like a Ninetales, as long as you don't need to use a utility move like Fate Tears or Safeguard here, but you would put something like Charizard with solar power, we'll get to in more detail, but like this is a Pokemon that does so much damage, you don't need specs on it. You don't need Fire Gem. You don't need these super intense items. You want to save the intense items for the Pokemon who struggle a little bit at the start to do initial damage. Once again, the big one being Ninetales. So you'd often want to put either specs on Ninetales or Heat Rock, depending on how long your fight is going to go. That's a big one. Your Ninetales' main job is to set up Sun. If you're setting up Sun but then not defeating the fight before the sun goes down and no one brings a backup Sun Setter, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You can do a different mixture of fire type moves on Ninetales. Honestly, all of them work well enough. You can go things like Fire Blast. You can go things like Overheat. I don't usually recommend Flamethrower, but sometimes it's worth slotting in like Flamethrower alongside. There's nothing wrong with having 2 or 3 fire type attacks on one raid Pokemon and then clicking the right one given the specific circumstance. Missing a Fire Blast can suck and can really hurt your damage at sometimes, but usually it's worth to risk it in raids because you can just re-queue or replay the raid over and over and over again until you beat it. So usually those high risk, high reward moves are worth it. Weather Ball is nice here as well. If you have Sun Up, it becomes a 100 base power, 100% accuracy fire type attack. So you'd always want to go something like this over Flamethrower. Usually the burn chance is going to be irrelevant, as raid Pokemon usually shrug off effects like that after a few turns anyway. Something like a Paralyze or a Burn isn't going to be nearly as effective in raids as it is in other fights. Sometimes a Paralyze from like a Thunder can be nice to slow the raidmon down, but it's always going to be secondary effects, right? To slow it down temporarily for like that turn cycle, but if you kind of take the secondary effects when you can. I don't really recommend bringing like T-Wave or Will-O-Wisp type Pokemon to raids. Sometimes it's relevant. Once again, please don't look at niche examples or outliers and be like, Patrouski, actually, you're incorrect. You should bring Will-O-Wisp to Slacking Raid, Phase 5. Like, keep in mind, I'm just talking in generalities here, and there will always be outliers when it comes to raids. There will always be exceptions to the rules, especially when not all raids are out. We only have a very few limited amount of raids that are actually out in the game, and there will be a ton more coming in the future. But I think that covers our first 2 slots, our utility Pokemon, which usually you'll have about 1 to 2 utility Pokemon per raid team, and then 4 to 5 DPS bonds. So the Fire and Sun type team really sets up the rest of how you should build every single other raid type team. And I won't be covering too many team builds in this video. I'll do a few of the simple ones, a few of the like really common ones, but generally this is just about what Pokemon to have built, and then you and your team can coordinate and figure out how to build those teams with those Pokemon when the correct raid pops up. And if you have any questions or feel like I missed anything, go ahead and leave your comments in the video, because I will try to answer everything the best I can, or I'm sure there'll be other people who are even better than I at raids who could help answer things out in the comments, which is greatly appreciated. All right, next up, let's start talking about our special attackers on the team. We have our Solar Power Charizard and our Eruption Typhlosion. Usually you'll be wanting to put things like Charcoal or Expert Belt or just lesser helping damaging items on these Pokemon. You shouldn't generally have to use a Choice Scarf on them or make up for their speed in any way, but if you have to for some reason, I could see that item slotting in here as well. But as you can see, the Charizard and Typhlosion both go Modest. Once again, in PVM and raids, you don't have to use Perfect Natures, Perfect IVs. You could totally go Mild, Rash, or Modest here. I strongly don't recommend going things like Timid. It can matter in certain very particular raids, but not often. Usually you want damage in raids. Usually the most important thing is just plus damage, plus damage, plus damage, and you don't want to go quiet because that does hurt your speed too much for it to be relevant. So let's just pick through these Pokemon stats, talk about what they do, talk about their moves really quick. 2v2 special attack EVs, 2v2 speed EVs. It's very important. You really do need hidden ability on your Charizard. Typhlosion's pretty simple. You don't really need too much. You need to get Eruption, obviously, but he naturally learns it at level 82 or something. You can always heart scale it if you need to as well. Here are the Typhlosion stats. You can also very easily use a Jimmy Run Typhlosion. I'm pretty sure that's what this is. So if you already have a Jimmy Run Typhlosion, congratulations. You already have a raid Pokemon, which is always awesome. You want those multi-use Pokemon because having to prepare more and more just gets really complicated and takes too much time, right? So the more multi-use mons you have, the better. Here is the Charizard, 31 special attack. You don't need that. It could just be 25 plus special attack, and all of these stats are good enough. 14 HP. Once again, a very good raid Pokemon. 14 HP IV. It doesn't need to be perfect. Don't overstress about that. Better strategy is more important. In terms of the move set, we see a lot of fire moves, and I genuinely do use all of these depending on the certain raid. Especially having Tailwind in the back on this Charizard has been really helpful for specific fights where you want to set up a Tailwind later in the fight. So I'll set up like Tailwind with my Murkrow to lead, and then have a backup Charizard later in the fight because it does last only 4 turns Tailwind. So if you need to have an extra Tailwind for like 5 and 6 turns to do more damage, it's really nice to have something in the back like that. Usually, Heat Wave, Fire Blast, and Blast Burn. We do use Blast Burn occasionally. It's pretty rare because you should be doing max damage with Charizard, but just in case for some reason the raid has lowered your special attack or halved its damage, there's a lot of raids that have a mechanic where like over the long course of the fight it will take reduced damage based on the typing of damage that that's been dealt the most damage to. So if it's like a raid you've obliterated with a fire type Pokemon, for example, then later in the raid it could become resistant or take less damage to fire type attacks. However, with Solar Power Charizard under Sun with Blast Burn, you probably still do a disgusting amount of damage. So that's always nice to have for certain things just in case. Typhlosion really is extremely simple. You really just want Eruption and all the stats I talked about. It's probably one of the most simple raid Pokemon. Having Flamethrower in the back is nice, just in case you're in a weird situation where your Typhlosion lives, and he is at like 1 HP and doesn't want to clear Eruption. So having Flamethrower is definitely super nice here. Other than that, I can't really think of any other utility moves on him, to be honest. And then the Charizard looking like this. You could definitely switch things around here. You could go things like Air Slash, maybe if you really wanted to on this, but I think you would rather just bring a flying type Pokemon to raids like that. So this is the moveset that I rock on my Charizard. And then next up, you kind of have your flex slots when it comes to your fire type team. So right now I have Darmanitan over here and Volcarona. Darmanitan is a mon you might want to have Choice Scarf on. You almost never ever need a damage type item on Darmanitan because he does so much damage. Because his main strength is his 140 base attack. He is a monster when it comes to that. Darmanitan's fantastic because even though he's just a fire type, you kind of forget that. You kind of think he's a fire fighting type. Number one, because he's a big ape, and then secondly, because his superpower does so much damage with his base attack that he just feels like a stab move, right? So adamant Darmanitan, which is kind of abnormal. Usually his speed's a little bit lower. You usually want to go, jolly, but in PVM, in raids, you usually want a adamant Darmanitan. We can see the stats here. Adamant, naughty, or lonely all work, of course. Any of those plus attack natures that don't hurt the speed. EVs, very simple, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. IVs, here's my IVs, 20 plus in defenses. 25 plus speed. Having 25 plus speed here is definitely probably pretty important. You might even want, like, if you can only pick one, having the speed is pretty important here because it can get outsped by certain things, but you're gonna have Tailwind up most of the time. Flare Blitz, very, very important. Self-damaging moves in raids don't really matter because most of the time right now, the way that raids work currently is that I would say 80% of raids are like DPS battles where you're just trying to get off as much damage as possible, and the Pokemon you're using is almost always gonna die. So just getting off a massive amount of damage, it's like the recoil damage doesn't really matter because you're probably gonna die anyway. So Flare Blitz here is incredible. Superpower. U-turn can be really nice in certain fights. I don't know if I've ever clicked Facade or if it's ever been right to click Facade. You could maybe throw in some utility move here if he has one, but these three moves are your main bread and butter on Darmanitan. Sheer Force is kind of important. Actually, what you'll do is you'll put Life Orb on him because you can add a Life Orb onto a Sheer Force Pokemon and negate the effects while also getting the plus 30% damage boost. So definitely put Life Orb Sheer Force on Darmanitan can be a big boost. Next up is Volcarona. There's a lot of things else that could go here. You could put Heatran here. You could put Entei. You could put Chandelure. I'll go show you guys those builds actually in a quick second. But here is an example of a Volcarona. Not the best example of a Volcarona. This is more of a PvP Volcarona actually. I think I have a few different Volcaronas in my boxes. I just grabbed this one. It is bold. If you're playing this in a raid, you want modest, mild, or rash. And this is overkill. This is hard over. This is just a good PvP Volcarona. So 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed. Don't need 5 times 31 like this. Just go 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses is nice but not necessary. The big things on Volcarona, you end up going Fiery Dance because there's a chance in certain fights where it can live that you have a 50% chance to get that boosted, which is super nice. Or just having Fire Blast slotted in on the side is nice. You really want Fiery Dance, Fire Blast, Bug Buzz are the big ones. Quiver Dance is not really relevant on a raid Volcarona at all. You're almost never going to use this. So if you're just using your Volcarona for raids, I believe this thing gets Tailwind. So you could go ahead and slot on something like Tailwind. You could go ahead and slot it. You could put Hurricane on this if for some reason you're using it in a rain team, but I can't imagine that being that amazing. I believe this thing gets Tailwind, but I could be, yeah, put Tailwind on this would be phenomenal. You could do Will-O-Wisp, although I wouldn't super recommend it. The next thing is, speaking of Will-O-Wisp, its flame body ability is hyper relevant. The raid Pokemon getting burned, accidental burns and incidental, like, paralyzes burns are very, very good against raids. You just don't want to, like, waste a whole turn on your Pokemon clicking T-Wave or Will-O-Wisp most of the time. Some raids will have you do that, but most of the time you don't want that. But having that accidental flame body to reduce damage on your teammate's Pokemon, or taking that's super, super, super helpful. All right, but that is the main fundamental Sun team, which is the most popular team, the best team that is useful at 80 to 90% of raids in PokeMMO. I'm going to go ahead and go over some variants of it now. So we talked about Volcarona, but if you have this team, if you understand this team, you are already at such a massive advantage within PokeMMO raids. You are so ahead of the competition. You're going to be so far ahead of random queue and solo queue teammates if you just understand a Sun team. Sticking to the core Sun team discussion, let's go over some of the other major Pokemon that can be used on some Sun teams. One of the biggest ones being Chandelure. As you can see here, I have 2 different Chandelures, one being modest, one being docile, which is suboptimal. We want modest, mild, or rash nature on this Pokemon. 252 special attack EVs, 252 speed. This one was EV trained for something else nichely, don't worry about that. And then IVs, obviously you want to prioritize 25 plus in special attack, 25 plus in speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses if at all possible. It is totally okay to run like 31 or 25 plus. You could have a Pokemon that's just 25 plus in the attack, 25 plus in the speed, and then all the defenses be like 0. That would most likely be fine for most raids. There's certain raids where you want the defenses, but for a lot of things, that's going to be totally okay. The reason why I have both of these Chandelures out, because they do have different positives and negatives, and I wanted to show that all they have different sets, massively different sets, actually. Safeguard is a move that sometimes pops up in raids. This was a big deal, I believe, if I recall correctly, in the Darkrai raid, because he would try to put all of your Pokemon asleep, or the Chandelure is also used at the Halloween Pumpkin boss, which this is really important there. It also wouldn't surprise me if something like a Safeguard is more relevant in the future in upcoming raids. A lot of the raid Pokemon we'll talk about today, especially the experimental raid Pokemon, most of those are going to be, hey, this is a pretty powerful Pokemon against certain effects. We just haven't seen those effects in a current raid. So keep an eye out for this. It could be good later down the line. But we see Safeguard, Shadow Ball, and Fire Blast are the same as on this one, and then Energy Ball is a nice little coverage slot in. You shouldn't really need coverage like this on a raid Pokemon. Think of, fighting a raid Pokemon the same way as you fight a gym leader in traditional Pokemon. Not in Pokemon, they kind of like fill out those teams a lot more. But in traditional Pokemon, if you're fighting Misty, you don't really need to bring some sort of like grass Pokemon coverage. The odds of Misty having a grass Pokemon is pretty much 0%, right? So, I also have Heat Wave over here. Some fights you're going to want to kill the ads, which if you don't know, the ads are like the little Pokemon on the side that the raid boss summons. Some of the fights you're going to want to kill the ads because they create problems. And some of the fights you're going to not want to kill the ads. And specifically killing the ads can cause more problems. So another big factor. So sometimes you want to Heat Wave and actually like do spread damage and take care of the ads. Sometimes you just want to Fire Blast or Flamethrower. On any of these Fire Blast mons, you also can go wide lens. It's kind of an option. Generally on Chandelure, I feel like I actually do end up going like flame or like Life Orb, or I feel like I don't always like Charcoal. I feel like Chandelure kind of needs weirdly the damage boosting item, but I could be mistaken. But wide lens is definitely something you'll see on certain Pokemon in raids depending on the raid. Absolutely, it's an item you'll see. So those are the two Chandelures. Next up is Moltres and Entei. These are good legendary Pokemon in raids, even Moltres, which you wouldn't assume. This goes into the whole discussion of people always say, oh, why not just make all legendaries permanently ownable? Just let legendaries run free in PokeMMO. Well, the problem is they're too good. They're way too powerful inherently. They were not balanced around raids. Legendary Pokemon were not balanced around a multiplayer system like this, a market like this. And, it shows with raids because almost all of the legendaries are very, very good at raids, except for Articuno, poor Articuno. But anyways, Moltres over here, Miss Buds, the best food in the world, chicken pot pie, modest nature Moltres. You can change and adjust Moltres and all the legendary IVs and their nature with nature herbs. So for like modest, you have to buy a modest nature herb, and then for the IVs for the elemental birds, you will have to buy the elemental orbs, which can be kind of expensive. And I believe the dogs use, what do they even use off the top of my head? They use something else. Is it the feathers? Oh, there's something else is it the quills? Rainbow quills, is it these? Yes, changing the IVs of Raikou, Entei, Suicune. So Entei and the elemental dogs do use rainbow quills. These use elemental orbs. Other legendaries use different items to affect their IVs, since you cannot breed these Pokemon, which honestly kind of makes it easier to make them perfect. I think it's actually easier for the average player to make these Pokemon perfect, and if you want to do them 5x31, you can, even though you don't really have to. But as you can see, Moltres is a special attacker, Entei is a physical attacker. This is very, very important to understand these distinctions. Understanding what Pokemon is a physical attacker, what Pokemon is a physical attacker is super, super important. Certain raid fights are going to want you to bring a more physical fire type team. Bring your Darmanitan, bring your Entei, Blaziken, so we'll get to that in a bit, but et cetera, right? But some of them will want you to bring like your special attackers. So it just depends on what the raid is, on whether you want to prioritize special or physical damage. Here's the IVs on these. So Entei is physical. You want to go Adamant Nature. Moltres is special. You want to go Modest, Mild Rash, Adamant, Lonely. No, if you're picking the nature on your legendary, you probably should just go Adamant. Just go Adamant. Just pay for the correct nature to have the correct nature on the Pokemon. 2v2 special attack EVs, 2v2 speed, 252 attack EVs, 252 speed on Entei. Here's the IVs. You can make it perfect. Moveset is probably the more interesting thing. On Moltres, I do go Flamethrower. Have Sunny Day in the back just in case something happens or you need to set up a Sun later in the fight. If for some reason your teammate wasn't heat rocked or just the Sun wore off, I think having Sunny Day on here is nice. You probably could put Tailwind on this as well, but most of the time, I'm pretty sure I just click Flamethrower most of the time on Moltres. You could go Fire Blast here as well. Hurricane is really only clicked. You're almost never in a rain team with this thing, but if for some reason that happens, I think I have clicked Hurricane in the past. Hurricane can be clicked in certain fights in certain instances, but you have to risk that that miss chance, which is pretty brutal. You don't want to have to do that in raids if possible. You're probably running something. You could put Specs on your Moltres. It has 125 special attack, which is not bad, but might need a little bit of an oomph. So you could put Specs, Life Orb, Fire Gem. Don't sleep on the gems. The gems are extremely, extremely good in raids. Well, that's what about Entei. Entei has Sacred Fire, his signature move, 100 base power, fire, physical attack with a 50% chance to burn. That 50% chance to burn is nice. And then Bulldoze for some speed control. This almost never comes up, but it's nice to have. Extreme Speed can very rarely come up if you need to do a little bit more damage and you're going to get outsped at the end of a fight to help your team pull it through. Crunch occasionally comes up. And then for item on Entei, you could go Choice Band, you could go Choice Scarf, you could go Fire Plate, any damaging item we talk about. I might do a whole video on items, I think. You could also go Assault Gear like you see here. I forget what raid this was used against, but I did use Assault Gear on my Entei against something, and it was very, very, very effective. Let it live long enough to get like 1 or 2 more attacks off, which really, really, really can help you get some extra damage. If you can extend a Pokemon's life to 2 attacks, it's a big deal in raids, but sometimes it can also mess up the flow of your team. So it's a thing you want to be careful with. Next up is Heatran. Obviously, most people watching this probably don't have Heatran. I only have it because Jejgunz gave me his. I haven't done the Heatran raid yet. This is its own beast. They are kind of expensive. I think it's like a 3 mil Pokemon. And then the raid is pretty difficult. It's like 2 mil. It's getting cheaper and cheaper, and the raid is pretty difficult. One day we'll get to that, but so I don't think I've personally used Heatran in a raid yet because this was just given to me recently, but I'm assuming it's similar to Typhlosion with some more utility. So we see modest nature. We can check out the base stats. It's a special attacker, 130 base special attack, pretty bulky, only 77 speed. This is a mon you might want to put Scarf on, a mon you want to bring out first if you have Tailwind up. That's a big thing during raids as well, is to prioritize if you have Tailwind up, as long as you don't need slower Pokemon later in the fight because they set up Trick Room or something like that. But if you have slower mons, you want to bring out your slowest mons closer to like the beginning of your Tailwind, with your Tailwind up for sure, because then you can, fix their disadvantage. If you bring in like all of your other mons and you leave Heatran as your 5th and 6th slot Pokemon in the raid, your like last 2 mons, and then you don't have an extra Tailwind to set up, he might get killed before he gets off damage. And that could be the difference of whether you win or lose that raid. So bringing in your slow Pokemon towards the beginning of the raid, after setting up your Tailwind to turn 1, is super, super crucial. Special attack EVs and speed EVs, 6x31, moveset, Eruption, Earth Power, Overheat, and that sometimes you go Overheat because sometimes you don't want to do AoE damage like we talked about, or also maybe sometimes because you're chipped down damage-wise. And then Metal Sound, harshly reducing the target's special defense stats. There are certain raids that will make adjustments, or like you can basically manipulate certain raids, certain Pokemon. If you lower you like can't do damage to them until you harshly lower their special defense or defense. I think it's Excadrill that does this. Excadrill sets up some sort of special shield. A lot of raids will have like non-traditional, very, very specific mechanics. So Excadrill sets up some like specific shield where you can't do any damage to him until you lower one of his defense stats by -2. So this is a way to do that. There's other Pokemon that do that. Things like Screech, etc. There's certain things you can do that with. So that's a nice little slot in on Heatran, but you probably can do a lot of other things here. And then one of the last Fire-type Pokemon to show you guys is Blaziken. Blaziken is one of the, I want to say, like, is he really a Fire type or is he a Fighting type Pokemon? Is a really good question. I actually have a different Blaziken I want to show you guys as well. Blaziken was really good in NU for a long time, so my PVM Blaziken looked very, very different from Jejgunz, I will say. I don't know which is better or worse, but he chose to go special attack with his, and mine is physical, so I will go ahead and show you guys both of them. There is a modest Blaziken here. We can see 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed. If you go this, you go Focus Blast, which relies on that hitting, which is pretty brutal. You have Blast Burn here, which that's a cool thing to have access to. You have Swagger, you have Toxic just for the chip damage, I guess. And then on this, my Blaziken that I've used this one for raids a ton. I personally, maybe I just don't understand this one. I would personally probably recommend this one because, especially for newer players or for players who don't want to build that many raid Pokemon, I've really loved this Blaziken in raids. Its biggest problem, it's jolly nature, probably should be adamant, but its biggest problem is that it does get outsped sometimes, but it's, you know, it's 80 speed. You want to bring this in early on into the tailwind like we talked about, but Blaziken sometimes doesn't do quite enough damage in raids. He's definitely a choice banner. You want to put the choice band, your best damaging item on him. You want to put the choice band, the gem, something to increase his damage by 50% or whatever you can, at least for one attack, right? So, but here's my Blaziken, jolly nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31 attack IV, 31 speed, and then here's the moveset. I really like Blaziken because he's a firefighting type, which firefighting is probably the best type in raids in general because there are so many normal type raids. There are so many raids that get wrecked by fighting types and so many raids that get wrecked by sun fire teams. So being able to bring Blaziken might be the most multi-use Pokemon, aside from like a utility mon like Murkrow, but like him and Darmanitan are probably the two most like diversified multi-use DPS Pokemon in raids. Being able to spam close combat with stab where need be against certain raids, and then being able to spam Flare Blitz with stab against certain raids. Both of these are very important. I think I've clicked U-turn or Brave Bird like once or twice, but it's not super relevant. I wouldn't worry about it. But just a good Blaziken with CC and Flare Blitz will do work in raids. All right, next up, we can talk about another entire team within PokeMMO Raids. This is probably the second most popular team in all of PokeMMO Raids, alongside the Fire type. You have the Sun team, and then you have the Fighting type team. There are a lot of Pokemon, a lot of Raidmons that are weak to the Fighting type. Now, normally you'd have like a Murkrow or something like that leading up here with Tailwind, so the team wouldn't look exactly like this. Keep that in mind. However, I wanted to show you guys as many Fighting type DPS mons as possible, so let's go ahead and jump into it. First things first is Medicham. This thing with pure power does so much damage. Doubling its attack stat is just ridiculous. It should double the attack stat. Also, like it's not just its base attack stat, but like its entire attack stat. So 240 doubled. It just gets ridiculous. Very powerful Pokemon. Does have speed control problems with that 80 tier speed, so you have to bring this in early on into the Tailwind. You want to make sure to save your speedy Pokemon most of the time for that 5th and 6th slot. Since Tailwind lasts 4 turns, you want to like lead your Tailwind Murkrow, bring in 3 massive slower DPS Pokemon, and then save the 5th and 6th for your naturally faster DPS Pokemon in the back. All right, so let's break down Medicham. This is a perfect example. You don't need Adamant here. You don't need a perfect mon. Just Lonely, Adamant, Naughty, all work. This thing is very frail. It's probably going to die. Just get some big damage off with it. 252 attack EVs, 2d2 speed, 31 attack, 31 speed, high jump kick, and close combat. Very important here. I cannot tell you how many times on my own Medicham I only have high jump kick on mine. I need to remember to put CC on mine, and there have been times where it's like, okay, if I miss this high jump kick, we probably lose the raid. And if I just had CC to have that extra consistency, it'd be so much better. High jump kick can offer more damage sometimes, but you have that 10% chance to miss. It's 130 base power with stab, which does increase to like 65. So this is like 195, essentially a 195 power attack, and then you have close combat with stab, which is 180. So when you see a difference here of 10 base power, it's actually more like a difference of 15 when you consider stab, and that can matter. That's the difference between something like a flamethrower and a fire blast, right? Like that 15, not quite, a little bit more, but like it's pretty close. Like a 75 base power attack versus like a 91, right? You would think of a 75 base power attack more like a drain punch versus, is there any 90 base power attacking fighting move? Anyways, the point is, it can really matter sometimes that extra damage, but CC for reliability is super important. Zen Headbutt does matter sometimes. You might need to fish for that flinch chance. Like that might matter in certain situations, or just being able to attack something if it changes, or just being able to attack Pokemon that are weak to Psychic. I've definitely brought this Pokemon on Psychic teams. Gravity. I love this move. This is one of my favorite moves in raids. Gravity does a lot of things that people don't realize. I didn't realize for a long time as well. So the biggest thing with Gravity is that Gravity prevents things from levitating and prevents Magnet Rise. That's the big one. There's a few raids that will try to Magnet Rise, and Gravity prevents them from doing that. So Gravity is a requirement at certain raids, and usually you want to lead with the Gravity or use it around like a certain HP percentage when the Pokemon will try to use Magnet Rise. Keep in mind, Magnet Rise, so it lasts 5 turns, I believe. It's a 5-turn lasting temporary effect move, but this affects more than people realize. So number one, Gravity actually increases the accuracy of all moves. That's very, very important, and it's not mentioned on here at all, which kind of frustrates me, but it's really important in raids when a lot of your mons are like fire blasting or, you know, throwing off those 85% accuracy moves, 90% accuracy moves. Having Gravity up is super, super important. Number two, when Gravity is up, you cannot use High Jump Kick. This is something that I learned myself in a raid, and it blew my mind. I've never heard anybody say that before. But yes, you cannot High Jump Kick. There's a bunch of moves you can't use: Bounce, Fly, High Jump Kick, Normal Jump Kick, Magnet Rise, Sky Drop, anything that essentially requires you to like go high in the air in the lore, I guess, of the move. You cannot use it, which is kind of interesting. So if you Gravity, you cannot use your own High Jump Kick, which can be relevant. Definitely something to keep in mind. All right, next up is Glade. Oh, for like an item slot for Medicham, you could go Choice Band, Scarf, Life Orb. Pretty typical. A lot of the move stuff, or a lot of the item stuff you're going in raids, it's just going to be whatever damage items you have or speed items you may need. And then you're just trying to put the choice band on the weakest damage dealing physical attacker as opposed to the highest, if that makes sense. That's the big thing to factor in, because you want to make sure everyone's doing like max damage cap or getting as close to that as possible. Next up is Glade. What makes Glade so powerful, step one, is its sharpness ability. So making sure it has the sharpness ability is super, super important. But next up, you want to go Adam. This is a slower Pokemon similar to Medicham with that 80 speed. Make sure to bring it in early into the Tailwind can be nice. This thing can get some utility moves, I believe, as well. But pretty simple Pokemon. Adamant nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. Here's the IVs. You want 25 plus attack and speed, and then maybe 31 speed. Like on these 80 speed tier mons, having that 31 speed can be relevant against certain raids, even with Tailwind up. So if you're gonna pay for the extra IV on any Pokemon, go for the 31 speed on the lower speed, like Pokemon with like 80 speed or below, or 85 speed or below. You want to go for that. You might want to go for that 31 speed. But even that might not come up a lot of the time. So we have Sacred Sword, we have Psycho Cut, we have Close Combat. The big things here are that Sacred Sword and Psycho Cut are boosted, and Cut, I assume, are all boosted by Sharpness, which is a massive, massive damage increase of 50%. I assume the CC is just here as a backup, and because sometimes there are certain raids that turn off abilities. So if abilities get turned off, you might want to throw off the Close Combat instead of the Sacred Sword, because that will do more damage. I should have mentioned, these fighting type Pokemon that I picked are not like random fighting type Pokemon. Especially these four are the best fighting type DPS in PokeMMO for raids. I remember the math was done. There was a specific chart that was made. I don't know the exact numbers, but I do remember that these 4 Pokemon were kind of the best fighting type damage in the game, with Lucario being a solid option as well. And we'll get to why Primeape's not it's pretty good damage, but we'll get to why he's actually super meta in certain raids. Primeape was the all-star at the Darkrai raid, which I think is one of the coolest things in PokeMMO. We'll get to that in a sec, but let's go ahead and go on to Hitmonlee next. Pretty simple, similar thing, Adamant, Lonely, or Naughty Nature. Very simple. This guy is just here to do damage. Very, 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 very simple Pokemon. 2v2 attack EVs, 2v2 speed EVs, IVs. You can see here you want to prioritize attack and speed. This guy is not short on, I guess it's 87 speed, so you could go high speed on him if you wanted to. I was going to go damage nature though. High jump, similar situation, high jump kick and CC for that reliability. Brick break is nice just in case the raid sets up screens. This is one of those things where like maybe having a brick break TM around is nice, and then if you ever do a raid, you really have to adjust strategies or adjust Pokemon based on the raid that you're doing. If you told me, hey, what move should I have on my Hitmonlee for raids, I would just say high jump kick and CC, and the rest are kind of irrelevant. Like, if you want to add stuff on later on, like wide guard probably is good against certain fights. You know, brick break is good against certain fights, but you don't need these. You don't waste the yen to put these on immediately. Just put them on when you need to, right? That's the big thing. This one does have hidden ability access, but that's not relevant. It doesn't actually get anything. Just Reckless is the important thing. Reckless powers up moves that have recoil damage, which includes things like high jump kick, I assume. I don't know if it counts them. I'm not sure. But yeah, maybe you don't need Reckless, to be totally honest, but just high jump kick, CC, Hitmonlee, he just does enough damage, just with his pure base attack and just speed and just being a stab fighting type attack Pokemon. You want to have that speed, even though there's things like Conkeldurr or like Guts Machamp that have higher damage and have higher attacks. If you're not able to get off the attack, the speed is so important in raids. There's just so many situations in raids where if you're not able to get off the attack, you just lose. You have to have just enough speed. That 80, I always say like 80 speed is all you need in a lot of PVM and storyline situations. You need enough speed to be fast enough, and then the rest into damage. Next up is Mienshao, one of my personal favorite raiding Pokemon. You can see a fighting gem on it here. Want to go fighting gem, you could go band maybe, but probably want like an expert belt or black belt or something like that. We can see similar problem. I need CC on this, so ignore fake out. This is a PvP, I believe, Mienshao first and foremost, and I also use it for raids. You can absolutely do that, by the way, though. Keep in mind you can absolutely use a PvP mon in raids as well and kind of double up. So we see Adamant Nature, you could Adamant, Lonely, or Naughty, 2v2 attack EVs, 2v2 speed EVs, high attack, high speed. Is this thing, what's the speed? This is like 110, 105. You probably don't need 31 speed on this. You probably could just go 25 plus speed. The high 25 plus attack and then 20 plus in defenses, like we've talked about so many times. High jump kick, close combat over fake out here. U-turn, drain punch. Drain punch has come up in certain fights where the raid Pokemon has had its attack lowered enough to where I can just drain punch, keep my Mienshao alive permanently, do enough damage and be okay. U-turn has come up a time or two. Keep in mind Mienshao has regenerator, so if something happens where you bring him in on accident or need to switch him out for whatever reason, or some big attack, some charge attack from the raid's going to happen, you could U-turn out, heal him up, and then bring in something else and reposition. That does happen sometimes, but generally you're just spamming high jump kick or close combat on Mienshao. Next up is Lucario, which can go physical or special. I think it's harder. I would probably go special on Lucario just because it's harder to find special attacking. It's harder to find special attacking fighting type Pokemon. I think that's the biggest reason, which is probably why Blaziken was special earlier. You can go that, but I probably go physical on Blaziken, but you can go, I probably would go special on Lucario. And to be able to hit these focus blasts, you're going to need something like a gravity or a sweet scent up. There are a lot of fights where someone on your team will lead with a sweet scent Pokemon, which does lower the opposing mon's evasion, which allows you to hit things like focus blast with either 90 or 100% accuracy. But you also have Aura Sphere as a backup for consistent damage, and Quick Guard, and these are Foresight's irrelevant, I assume, but Quick Guard could do something, maybe things, but just focus blast in Aura Sphere, very simple Pokemon, modest nature, 2v2 special attack EVs, 2v2 speed, high. You want 25 plus special attack. What's the speed on this? Do you need 31 speed on this? You might want to consider 31 speed, but that's up to you. It's not really hyper relevant once again. So 25 plus or 31 speed, 25 plus special attack, and then 20 plus in the defenses. Lucario is an absolute glass cannon, though. If someone showed up with a 0 HP defense and special defense IV Lucario raid Pokemon to my raid, I wouldn't bat an eye. It really shouldn't matter most of the time. But throwing off Aura Sphere, Focus Blast can be nice. Maybe you want, like, if you're physical, you can go Bullet Punch and have like a priority move if that matters in certain raids, but this should be solid enough. Lucario is definitely a mon you want to put specs onto if possible. He's going to have a tough time doing max damage with his 115 special attack. If you can hit the focus, especially if you're Aura Sphering, you definitely want to put specs on this thing. If you're Focus Blasting, you might be able to get away with like an Expert Belt or Black Belt or something like a Fighting Gem, but you definitely want to put one of your high damage things on this guy. And the inner focus ability absolutely can come up at times. That's probably much better than Steadfast. Like, raising your speed in raids isn't super relevant beyond Tailwind. And then this is just not gonna, you're just not gonna live long enough to get the effects from Steadfast or Justified. But Inner Focus really can matter. Being not able to be flinched and dodging intimidates can, I guess intimidates a matter on special attacker, but not being able to be flinched can definitely matter in raids. Next up, maybe my favorite raid Pokemon, just because it's so funny. I love that I can say the sentence that Primeape was at one point a meta, or is a meta raid Pokemon, and was the best, probably the best crucial key Pokemon that we couldn't figure out for a little bit to take down the Darkrai raid. That makes me so happy that this monkey businessman is so good in PokeMMO, which makes me just so happy that I can say the fact that the Primeape market exploded. Why is he good? Let's talk about it. He's good. Well, hilariously, he's good because of an ability I don't have on him right now, which I don't know how that happened, but he's good because of Vital Spirit. Okay, you need Vital Spirit. Anger Point is irrelevant. Do I have a ability pill? I would just go ahead and ability pill this right now. I don't have one though. But Vital Spirit, okay, prevents the Pokemon from falling asleep. This was extremely important against Darkrai, against Dark Void, when he would constantly try to put your Pokemon to sleep. Everyone could lead with a Primeape, turn 1, dodge the initial Dark Void, and then throw up a fat CC, getting off massive starting damage, which you otherwise wouldn't be able to. It was a game changer in that fight. So here is a decent example of a Primeape. You definitely want Adamant, Naughty, or Lonely on this thing. This thing can struggle to do damage. Its base stats are not good. It is a weak, outdated, sadly, pig monkey, god, I love that, Generation 1 Pokemon. He's kind of power crept. He's not that good, but he has a niche in raids, which I absolutely love. So going Adamant, Naughty, or Lonely, super important. 2v2 attack EVs, 2v2 speed EVs, of course. You want, honestly, like, this is one of those mons you kind of do want as high attack IV and high speed IV as possible, because he is so weak. You kind of have to make up for that. You definitely want Choice Band on him. You definitely want close combat. U-turn is nice in certain instances. The rest is irrelevant. The rest is not going to pop up 99.9% of the time. His real job is just to stay awake with a Vital Spirit, prevent himself from being put to sleep, and then getting off some fat damage. All right, but that is the two absolute massively, like, most important raid teams covered. From this point onward, things will get a lot more scattered, but there still are some key raid Pokemon to cover that come up in certain raids. Things like Drizzle Pokemon for rain teams, things like Heal Block Pokemon, which can be extremely relevant. We'll get to that in a quick sec. And then things like screens, Prankster, Sableye with other utility like Gravity or Foul Play, etc., Confuse Ray, Rocky Helmet. So let's just jump into it. First things first, Drizzle Pokemon. Now these, I will say, I have not used a Drizzle team yet in raids. I know some people did for some specific raid. There was, I don't know if it was Heatran. I don't think there's been at least one raid where a rain team was viable. I have not used one yet. The only two Drizzle mons that I'm aware of in PokeMMO are Pelipper and Politoed. Politoed gets it via hidden ability, so make sure if you build yourself a Politoed, give it hidden ability access. And then the other one is, of course, Pelipper. I believe Pelipper is, I don't know which one's considered just better, especially for raids. A quick look would make me think that Politoed is better, just based on the stats. 70 speed, 90 special attack versus 95 and 65. Yeah, I would probably recommend Politoed, but it's going to be pretty minimal. If you already have a Pelipper built, for example, I would probably just rock that. You might get more utility mons on Politoed, but you get Tailwind, which is a big one. Tailwind on Pelipper is absolutely massive. These are I think some of the only Pokemon I'll be showing you today that aren't actually ready to fight raids. These are not ready to go. I'm just showing you them for the Drizzle. You would probably want to go something like Modest. You want to go Modest Nature on both of them, Modest, Mild, or Rash. Make them special attackers. Just go special attack EVs, speed EVs, special attack EVs, same thing on both. And then IVs, you'd want to prioritize 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses if possible. And then over to the moves, I would go something like Tailwind, probably Tailwind, U-turn, Hydro Pump, Hurricane on maybe Defog. Defog can very much come up in certain raids, so maybe like Tailwind, Defog, Hydro Pump, Hurricane could be a good move set on the Pelipper. And then over on Politoed, you probably want like Hydro Pump, Ice Beam. I don't know what other utility moves it can get. You can get Gravity. Gravity could be good. Maybe Pelipper is better just because it can be that Tailwind setup. That's honestly so massive. The problem is, I will say, if you're using Pelipper to set up Tailwind, you might want to go timid nature and go like full into speed. Like you might want to prioritize speed because it's going to be hard for it to get that Tailwind off. You might just not use it as a Tailwinder because it's going to be really hard for it to get that Tailwind off and be faster than the opposing raid Pokemon. Maybe you could go Damp Rock. You could go Starf with that speed investment to make sure you get that Tailwind off and then just die. There's a few things you could do with the Drizzlemons, but I'm not super versed with them, so I'm just going to move on. I don't want to give you guys any false advice. Anyways, next up is Heal Block Pokemon. Heal Block Pokemon are absolutely crucial. There are certain raids where if you don't bring a Heal Block Pokemon, your chance of defeating them goes from like 80% down to like 10%. Like it is so hard. If the Raidmon gets off a heal, it is so hard to beat those certain raids. Now, Heal Block Mons, this one's actually like set up to do other things. This is my Heal Block Mon, the Gothitelle. And look, as you can tell, it does nothing else. This thing is naive nature. You really need to make up for speed on these, especially the Behemoth. For whatever reason, there's just not any fast Heal Block Pokemon from what I'm aware of. Like Gothitelle is 65 base stat speed. These things are not really doing damage. You're just trying to, like this, look at this stat, like defense and speed. You're just trying to let them live long enough. This one's speed and HP. These are full utility Pokemon. They're not doing damage. Their job is just to stay alive long enough. You probably wouldn't want mild here. You'd probably want like timid on this, timid, naive, or hasty. You want to just live long enough to get off your heal block. That is the number one thing here. So probably Choice Scarf, heal block, and then the rest of the moves don't matter. Like you're only bringing these Pokemon to heal block fights. They are crucial for those heal block fights. Other than that, you don't need all the other stats. Just 31 speed. Just 31 speed. Speed, nature, Choice Scarf, heal block, that's it. That's all I got to focus on because those raids that need heal block really need heal block, and not getting that off loses you the whole fight, and they don't really need to do anything else. Next up, Rocky Helmet, Prankster Sableye. Sableye does need hidden ability access for this. That is super, super important. Any mon that operates with Prankster is just so fucking crucial. Recently, Murkrow with Prankster has kind of taken over. Like, Sableye used to be the preferred Pokemon, but now that Tailwind plus DPS has become so good, it's kind of taken over because obviously Sableye can't throw up Tailwind. But what Sableye can do, which isn't shown here, so apologies, it can set up Gravity and it can set up Light Screen and Reflect. Double screens. I would go Gravity, Light Screen, Reflect, Foul Play. Double screens on Sableye is very, very, very good with Rocky Helmet for certain fights, for certain teams. Back when like bulking up and getting tanky was really the meta for raids, Sableye was an absolute all-star. But now that the meta has shifted away from being bulky and setting up with like stored powers and iron defenses, etc., now that it's switched away from that over to just fast, high DPS, Sableye has fallen off, I will say. So it's much more important to have a Murkrow nowadays with Prankster. Next up is Roserade. This was super important. I believe, was it in the Shaman fight? There were certain big fights where having a Roserade was super important just to get off a fast Sweet Scent. This Pokemon's main job is really just to get off a fast Sweet Scent. 90 base stat speed is good enough with a 125 special attack stat. So if it lives, you can get off some insane damage with a Sludge Bomb or a Leaf Storm and just get off some crazy damage before it dies. This is a mon you definitely could put like Life Orb on or some sort of Grass Gem, something just in case to get you more damage, but you should be fast enough to get your Sweet Scent off, especially if you have a teammate with Prankster Tailwind leading with you. But Sweet Scent is just really, really crucial in certain fights because you want to raise, it's just to raise accuracy. It's just to lower the foe's evasion, which allows you to hit things like your Fire Blasts, like your Thunders outside of rain if that comes up, your Focus Blast. Hitting things with 100% accuracy can be super, super relevant to allow you to do higher damaging moves. So modest nature here, 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed. IVs are mostly, just 25 plus special attack, 25 speed is nice. Maybe focusing speed, prioritizing speed is more important than the 90 speed base stat. Sweet Scent, very, very important. Leaf Storm, pretty important. Sludge Bomb, pretty important. The other move is kind of up to you. And then in terms of abilities, this one has Technician, but I don't think it's doing anything obviously on it. I just don't know if the ability really matters here. You could go Poison Point just to accidentally poison the raid boss, but you might not. Toxic / Poison is just not a very good status to have on the boss, since it shrugs it off every few turns. It's not actually going to accumulate that much chip damage. I'd rather have something like a Flame Body Burn or a static Paralyze. So arguably not going Poison Point just so one of your teammates could get a burn off or a paralyze off just accidentally. That's actually like way more relevant in my opinion. All right, and then a little location change couldn't hurt. Let's go through some of the electric type Pokemon and legendaries. Zapdos is probably one of the most powerful Pokemon overall in raids. One of my favorite things was during the Gyarados raid fight. You can do almost the entire fight with just one Zapdos and then 5 other sacrifice Pokemon. You do have to set up things like Tailwind to kind of take care of certain things, but hilariously, just vault switching, putting a specs on Zapdos and vault switching at Gyarados, what you would do is it would be 4 times effective, you would do maximum damage, and you could just switch over to like 5 level 80 Magikarps if you wanted to, and just vault switch back and forth and kill the Gyarados raid, which is very, very cool to me. I loved that strategy. It was like 2 years ago that was viable. But here's the Zapdos. Once again, needing elemental orbs and a nature herb to be able to adjust its nature and IVs. Really simple special attack and speed EVs. I don't even have mine done yet, which is kind of funny, but mostly 6 times 31. Vault Switch, Thunder, and Discharge. It feels funny to have, 3 electric moves on this thing, but it really, really can matter. Like, if you're in a rain team, having that Thunder is super relevant. It's a massive damage increase, plus the 30% paralyzed chance. Discharge is really nice for the paralyzed chance where it comes up. Vault Switch is really nice at times. And then Hurricane can be massive in rain teams or in certain fights. You could put Tailwind on this thing, I believe, as well. This could be a Tailwinder, and, you're always looking for more Tailwinders to some extent. You could also technically set Rain Dance or other things with this, so there's a lot you can do with Zapdos. It's probably one of the most powerful raid Pokemon if you need some sort of electric type attacker. And then next up is Raikou. Raikou is much less powerful than Zapdos, just statistically and stuff. It's just not as good. 115 special attack, 115 speed, and just typing wise, Zapdos being the typing that it is, it just flying electric is just so good. But Raikou, mine's timid. You probably should be modest on it. Once again, mine's just set up for kind of multiple different things. 2v2 special attack EVs, 2v2 speed EVs, 6 times 31. Thunderbolt on this. Aura Sphere is relevant. Discharge, once again, probably could be Thunder over Thunderbolt here. And then a Reflect randomly slotted in case I need to set up an extra screen or something like that for some reason. It's just kind of on there. Once again, a lot of the moves are very, very flexible. Each Pokemon usually has 1 to 2 moves that are hyper relevant, and then everything else is hyper flexible. Now, Hydreigon is a Pokemon that I have not used very much in raids, but some raids do call for it. This one's kind of a weird Hydreigon. I think I've seen people use Snarl. I think certain raids will require you to bring like a Snarl Pokemon. Let's see if we can find that really quick, actually. So there are, let's see if this thing actually does learn Snarl. I'm just mistaken. No, here it is, Snarl. A special attacking dart type attack that does lower, making the target, so it does lower the opponent's special attack. So I have seen Snarl strategies using Hydreigon in raids, but it's a nicher Pokemon. It has a crazy moveset. I think the biggest thing with Hydreigon is its moveset is just so expansive. Having access to Tailwind, having access to Snarl, being able to set up weathers. I have not used this Pokemon in raids yet personally, but I do have one made that is naive. It's definitely go special attacking. Naive, you could go modest. You probably should go modest, mild, or rash. And then you have special attack, speed. You probably could do like Dark Pulse and Draco Meteor for damaging attacking moves on this thing. This is a weird Hydreigon once again I just haven't really used yet. In terms of ability, it only gets Levitate. So you don't have to worry about that. But that is pretty much just a simple Hydreigon. Hydreigon could arguably be over in the experimental box, to be honest. And I think a lot of these Pokemon start to bleed the line between what's a core Raidmon and an experimental Raidmon. But I have at least seen Hydreigon used. Now, Honchkrow, Absol, and Shiftry. I think these are some of the most fun easiest to pilot and coolest raid mons because they're just Sucker Punch Pokemon. That's it. That's all these guys do, okay? Pretty much, right? So all of them are going to be essentially the perfect trio: Lonely, Naughty, Adamant, the beautiful, perfect plus attack natures that don't hurt speed. So we can see here they're all going to do the same thing: 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed on all of them. IVs. Let's show them off. The Shiftry's just double 31. The Absol's just double 31. The Honchkro's nicer. You don't need it to be this nice. Just double. These are the perfect Pokemon to just go 2 times 31 on. And then let's go ahead and show the actual attacks. You are clicking Sucker Punch on these things. I want to say 99.9% of the time. That's their main job. I think I did click Leaf Blade once on Shiftry. But these Pokemon are just meant to click Sucker Punch, do max damage, and die. I love Sucker Punch mons because it's so easy to slap a Choice Band on these or slap on Life Orb, some really nice, or Dark Gem, honestly. The odds of you getting off max damage and getting off your attack with Sucker Punch, it's like 90%. It's like so high. It depends on the Pokemon, obviously. If it like something resists it, that's not gonna work, but you want to be super effective, of course. But Sucker Punch has been one of my favorite Pokemon to use in raids. It's just so easy to utilize. And then in terms of, you have Wind Rider here, which boosts attack when absorbing a wind move or when Tailwind takes effect. That can be really relevant. You know, there's a lot of Tailwinds in raids, something to keep in mind. Moxie over here on Honchkrow, not gonna matter most of the time. You could go Super Luck, honestly, over it, but I don't know if it's going to matter. I don't know if the crit will matter too much. It could matter certain things. Same with the Absol if you're on Super Luck. Super Luck is probably the best ability to have on those two. But that is just the Sucker Punch Pokemon explained. They're very simple. Just Glass Cannon, raw damage, get some damage off before they die and before they get hit. All right, we have a few more electric types to discuss since they can sometimes often be a pretty good type within raids. First up is Magnezone, just an absolute beast in terms of damage, especially Analytic Magnezone can do crazy damage at times, but for that he has to move last in the entire turn, which with 60 speed he kind of can, but with Tailwind it's going to prevent a lot of time. So Analytic is it's probably the best ability that you can go on it. Maybe Sturdy to live one attack and maybe have a higher chance of getting off some damage, but when the raid Pokemon's attacking like 3 times or so, it often doesn't matter, and sometimes that can even hurt you. Sometimes you just want your mon to go down to bring in the next Pokemon. But modest Magnezone, modest 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed, of course, 31 attack, 31 speed. This is definitely a Pokemon that you could go Starf on, like Choice Starf, and just make sure you go faster. Thunder, it's gonna be in range. Thunderbolt, Flash Cannon is nice. You could go Discharge. You probably wouldn't go Volt Switch on this. It's just too slow. And then you can go, I wouldn't go Explosion here though. You can go Gravity. This is a Gravity Pokemon. So absolutely, please keep in mind, sometimes there are absolutely times where you'll want to have a Gravity Magnezone. I'm pretty sure one of the mons that I used was a Gravity Magnezone during one of the raids that I've done. Next up is Ampharos. Ampharos is one of the most interesting meta raid Pokemons out there, okay? It was metaverse, weirdly enough, it was metaverse slacking. What makes Ampharos so good is its hidden ability access, okay? So, and teamwork. Ampharos is probably the worst Pokemon on this entire list to solo queue with, okay? What makes Ampharos so good is because of its plus ability, which ups its special attack if another Pokemon has plus or minus on the battlefield. If you and your other teammates coordinate all bringing in your Ampharoses together so they all have the plus ability and they're all getting boosted, that's really good. Is if Ampharos is the only Pokemon on the battlefield with the plus ability and you're not getting boosted, it's pretty bad. It becomes a much worse Pokemon. Not the worst thing in the world, but significantly worse. It has a 115 special attack stat, which is pretty solid, but its speed stat is abysmal. It's kind of too slow for raids, and its damage doesn't make up for it the same way other mons do. You're really trying to take advantage of that plus ability if you're using Ampharos. So only use this in a coordinated team, but if you're using it in a coordinated team, it can be really good. You want modest nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus in special attack and in speed. Having 31 speed could be nice since it's a pretty slow Pokemon. And then 20 plus in the defenses if you can afford it, of course. Thunder, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, and a screen backup is nice. Pretty simple Pokemon. Focus Blast was really relevant against slacking when you start the fight with Sweet Scent, of course. Next up is Krookodile. Krookodile is just probably one of the most versatile PvM Pokemon out there. It makes sense. He's just a decent slot in for certain raids. I don't think he's amazing or like the best Pokemon or perfect for any raids. He's kind of just like an all-around like decent Pokemon you can slot into Jimmy Run teams, raids, Elite Four reruns, you know, certain just certain PvM late game activities, Battle Tower. Adamant Krookodile is nice. 2v2 physical attack, or 2v2 physical attack, 2v2 speed. Krookodile is a Pokemon with a really nice, a decent physical attack and a decent enough speed. Where Krookodile really shines is its Moxie ability, which you can use Earthquake to kill the ads in the raids, which will boost your Moxie, which will boost your attack. So you get a boosted attack after knocking out any Pokemon, which can be relevant. Earthquake, I will say Earthquakes and ground types in general have a weird time in raids because it splits up the damage when really you just want to be doing damage to the boss a lot of the time. If for some reason you're able to make your Krookodile live after getting attacked by the boss, that's when like, okay, the Moxie is really, really good actually. But if your Krook is dying after getting Moxie procced, it like you're just wasting damage. It doesn't really matter because Earthquake is going to divide the damage. Any AoE move, the more targets it has to hit, the less damage it does. To some, I think if it hits more than one, it does less. So it splits up the damage. So if you're like doing, I think it lowers it to like 75-ish. I don't know exact numbers, so don't quote me on it, but it lowers the base power effectively to like 75 or so against those Pokemon. So it significantly lowers the damage when it's hitting multiple Pokemon. If you're just Earthquaking one Pokemon, it does the full 100 or whatever, 100 base power. Keep in mind, Earthquake and AoE moves like it do not hit your team's Pokemon in raids. That is very, very crucial to understand. So there's a slight benefit there, but a lot of the time you're probably just hitting Assurance on this thing. Because it's you have to just, it's not like Analytic you have to go last. Assurance, you have to just go after somebody, or I just have to take a little bit of damage on him, which almost already, or sorry, let me read it. The target already taken some damage, and it's so basically just move after. Almost always you're going to be a little slower than some other Pokemon on your team. So you could almost always turn Assurance into a 120 base power move. Assurance is just very, very good in raids, and most dark types probably should have Assurance as long as you're not the fastest Pokemon on the battlefield. So Krookodile could be arguably experimental, but I think he's kind of core because he's just so versatile. Just a decent Pokemon all around. Next up is Bronzong. Bronzong is a utility Pokemon. You want to go tanky on it. Sassy nature, 2v2 HP, 2v2 special defense. The IVs, as you can see here, the 31 attack is irrelevant, but just 25. This is the perfect level. Just 25 plus in defenses is nice. And then you don't really need, like it says Gyro Ball and Heavy Slam, but I don't even know how often you're actually clicking those. Most of the time, you're probably just setting up Trick Room, setting up Light Screen, and set up Reflect. Bronzong is a Pokemon that is used on Trick Room teams in raids. It's pretty rare you have a Trick Room team. Most of the time, if I'm being totally honest, you're actually using Trick Room on Bronzong or Trick Room to counter Trick Room raids. There are certain raids that will set up Trick Room, and what you can do is set up, if your opponent Trick Rooms and then you Trick Room, it turns off the Trick Room. It reverses it back to normal speed tiers. So that is something to keep in mind. That's probably your biggest use for Trick Room Pokemon Trick Room teams. Jynx with hidden ability access, specifically Dry Skin. This one has hidden ability access, but it lost the hidden ability somehow, so ignore that. It should be Dry Skin. Jynx with Dry Skin was a meta Pokemon for the Suicune raid. This is kind of a niche one. I wouldn't call it like it's a core for certain raids, but it's kind of niche. But hidden ability Jynx, probably one of the cheapest Pokemon to build on this list, as Alpha Jynxes are just unbelievably cheap. But it's also only because this Pokemon is only used for just the Suicune raids, or there's been like one Alpha Suicune raid, so keep that in mind. But Dry Skin Jynx was very, very good for that raid, with his plus special attack danger, mild, modest, or rash. 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed, very glass cannony style of, like, you just go the Dry Skin for the immunity. You don't really care about the HP regen. So Dry Skin is if it gets hit by a water type attack, it's immune and it restores HP. Keep that in mind. Let's go back over to Jynx. Mild, modest, or rash. High special attack, high speed, and then Psychic, Ice Beam for double stab, and then Fake Tears. Blizzards, you don't really need. You can have it or some sort of other slot in. You're risking accuracy if you're not Sweet Scented, but that could be good if you have the Sweet Scent up. Fate Tears is really nice, harshly lowering the opponent's special defense stat. This can be really, really relevant in certain raids, like the Excadrill one we talked about, where he has that that shield, like special mechanic. Certain raids will require you to lower the thing, and then I think it was like Suicune. Certain ones will try to constantly boost up their defenses. So if you constantly lower them to counteract that, you kind of negate that ability. So Fake Tears can be relevant. That is Jynx covered. Next up is Tyranitar. Now, when it comes to any weather setting Pokemon, please try to coordinate with your team, or at least don't willy-nilly bring a Tyranitar to a fight. There is nothing more frustrating than when you solo queue up and you set up your Tailwind, you set up your Ninetales Sun, and then someone on your team, a random, unprepared player, let's say, politely, switches in a Tyranitar on turn 2 or turn 3, erasing your Sun, totally obliterating you and most of your other people's strategies. Because they like big boy Tyranitar, because he is a big, cool monster. Yes, he is a cool monster, but he can also be detrimental and troll your team if you are not careful, okay? So don't bring Sandstream, don't bring any weather Pokemon willy-nilly to any raid. Like, bring fire-type teams if it's good against the raid, which it often is, but don't bring Sand or Drizzlemons just because you want to, you don't want to troll your team like that. But Assurance is very good in raids, so it's nice to have a Tyranitar. Adamant, there are certain ones where you might want to set up Sand. There are certain fights where like having Sand set up with Tyranitar was nice, honestly, just for that special defense boost, which can be super nice for rock types. But Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. Here's the IVs, just decent enough. This is obviously quite good. Assurance, Stone Edge, or Rock Slide here, and then really the other moves are probably kind of irrelevant. I'm gonna be super honest. Just Assurance and Stone Edge are solid enough. This could be an Assault Vest Pokemon, depending on the raid, or Assault Gear, excuse me. Depending on the raid that you're fighting, having that boosted special defense on top of the Sandstream boost can make your Tyranitar very, very, very tanky. All right, 6 more Pokemon lined up to talk about. Number 1, I actually did have a secondary Hydreigon that I didn't know about, so apologies. This is a much better Hydreigon than the one I showed previously. More of what I talked about, less utility and more just pure damage. Modest nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, really good IVs here. You don't need that good, obviously. Earth Power, Draco Meteor, Assurance, Dark Pulse. That Dark Pulse Draco Meteor combo I feel like being very, very powerful. This is a much better Hydreigon, a much better example. I haven't seen this been used at too many raids. Once again, like the Snarl was probably the best usage I've seen from it, but it's a pretty uniquely typed Pokemon, which can just position itself well against certain raids. Next up is Empoleon. This is a Pokemon that I have not used at all personally in raids, but its best usage is going to be, my guess would be competitive, being able to lead Empoleon against a bunch of Intimidate Pokemon, Intimidate spammers. There are certain raids that have a bunch of ads that come in with Intimidate. Being able to get free competitive boost off of that, boosting your special attack, is really, really, really powerful. So modest Empoleon here, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31 to attack and speed. Let's check out its base stats to see. I think it has a low speed. Yeah, one of the big things to take care of with Empoleon is its speed stat, making sure you bring it in early in on the Tailwind turns. But other than that, it's a pretty good Pokemon. Hydro Cannon, having access to Hydro Cannon, this is the water equivalent of Blast Burn. It's cool that we're seeing these moves be very good in raids. I should have talked about it more when I mentioned Blast Burn, but the downside to these moves, if you don't know, is they have to rest the next turn. So you're only using this move as a last resort, a Hyper Beam sort of style effect. You're only using this if you need to make sure you do max damage and you're going to die for sure that turn. If you're not going to die for sure that turn, never click Hydro Cannon. It's almost never, ever worth it. Haze is really, really nice against certain fights. It's a nice utility move to have. And then Brine. Brine, if the target's HP is down to about half, this attack will hit with double the power. Brine is typically a terrible move in Pokemon because if a Pokemon's HP is down below half, why would you? But it's like the worst timing to need that boost, right? In raids, it's actually really good because half the fight, this is that damage cap, half the fight, for like multiple turns, that Pokemon is going to be at below 50% HP. When a Pokemon can only take a maximum of 6.5, 7.5% damage per attack, he's going to be at that damage threshold where Brine is actually relevant for much, much longer. Whereas in traditional Pokemon, it's not going to be there long enough for it to really matter. So Brine is actually a very good water type move in raids when it comes up. But you also want Surf or something like that as well. Next up, Garchomp. Garchomp is kind of like Krookodile, where it's not amazing at any raid, but just having a nice Earthquake spammer, or just having a powerful Pokemon. I've brought Garchomp to plenty of raids with good success. Just really simple. It's Garchomp. He's a very, very powerful PvM Pokemon. Having access to, Lonely Nature. Rough Skin actually comes up a ton as well. This is Sandvale, but I would strongly encourage to get Hidden Ability. It's more expensive, but man, I've seen some Rough Skin, like Rocky Helmet, or just Rough Skin in general, Garchomps. I've definitely seen a raid that we would have lost be won because of the Rough Skin damage from Garchomp. Like, that can actually really, really, really matter. So Rough Skin chip damage is more than you would expect in raids, in my personal opinion. Lonely, Naughty, or Adamant is a must. 252 attack, 252 speed. Just simple attack and speed IVs. And then the moveset being Earthquake, Dragon Claw. I probably wouldn't go Rush here. That's kind of risky. If you're sweet send it up, honestly, if you're boosted accuracy, Dragon Rush is probably fantastic, to be fair. Wouldn't go Surf here. This is probably just a utility move used to actually travel around the world. Like, I think you needed Surf, for example, if you don't have an Ocarina, you needed Surf to be able to get to the Perugly raid during the Lunar New Year event, so that's probably what this is for, honestly. But I wouldn't use Surf in the actual raid itself. You could go, I'm trying to think what else you could even go on this thing. Like, really, its job is to just click those few moves. You could go Bulldoze for speed control if that's relevant. Could go Draco Meteor if you need to switch typings for some reason, but it's really just there to click EQ and Dragon Claw for the most part. Just do decent damage. Next up, we do have two Magic Bounce Pokemon to talk about. So Magic Bounce is very relevant against certain raids. Certain raids will try to set up a certain kind of rocks, or like I think Steelix is a good example. You don't use Magic Bounce against Steelix, you double defog Steelix, but Steelix sets up these like Steelix raid specific like shards that are kind of like super stealth rocks essentially, and you want to double defog for that, but that's a different thing. Magic Bounce is useful to reflect status changing moves. One of the biggest one being Intimidate. Magic Bounce actually does stop Intimidate and throws it back at the raid Pokemon, which is super, super relevant. So you will see fights where you lead with a Magic Bounce Pokemon, whether it being Xatu or Espeon, and then get off. Xatu's fantastic. I think Xatu's probably the better one over Espeon, even though Espeon can do damage and set up gravity and do other utility things. I like that Xatu is able to set up Tailwind and Defog after it's a pure utility Pokemon after leading for the Magic Bounce. I have also seen people run Trick Xatu and then Trick like a Lagging Tail or some sort of like depowering, like debuff item onto the raid Pokemon. So just in case they do damage, Modest Nature on both. Modest Nature over on the Xatu, 252 in special attack and 252 speed on both. Here are the IVs. You want 25 plus special attack and speed, and then 20 plus in all the defenses if possible. We already went over the moveset to a decent degree. The biggest ones here being Psychic, Gravity, and the biggest ones here being Tailwind and Defog. I wouldn't really go, Stored Power is irrelevant here. I wouldn't really go this, and I wouldn't really go, you could go Air Slash, it's fine, like Psychic or Psyshock over here. And that is it for those guys. You do need hidden ability access on both of them. Make sure if you're breeding one of these Pokemon, Magic Bounce is hidden ability for both of them. So please, please, please make sure to get yourself a hidden ability Pokemon. If you're going to make those, you can't miss out on that. Next up is Archeops. I love this Pokemon. It's super fun Pokemon, has been really good in certain raids, a really good backup Tailwinder. I would 1000% put Tailwind here, probably over Rock Slide or Pluck. I could see Pluck being relevant though. Pluck, if the user is holding a berry, the user eats it and gains its effect. There are berries that you do want to, usually Incinerate is the play, but Incinerate is meta in certain raids because you want to get rid of that berry. So I could see Pluck being relevant, but you want to go Tailwind over Rock Slide. Let's talk about Archeops. So Archeops is a really, really powerful Pokemon. On paper, look at this thing's stats: 140 base attack, 112, 110 speed. This thing is a monster. However, it has this ability called Defeatist, where it lowers its stats when its HP, it like halves all of its stats, or basically all of its attacks, when its HP is half or less. Now, in raids, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm going to be so honest. In raids, you just want to get off a big fat attack anyway and just die or get out of there, so it kind of works. This thing having Acrobatics allows you to run Flying Gem on it as well. You can go Flying Gem Acrobatics. You can do Head Smash, which I love, is one of my favorite moves. Probably, no, it is my favorite move in all of Pokemon. It's high risk, low reward is what I call it. I love it so much, even though it's pretty terrible in most situations, it's really good in raids because you just want that pure damage. So acrobatics, head smash, tailwind. I have used Archeops as a backup tailwinder in certain teams, and it's crucial on those teams and in those certain raids. And then once again, pluck could be kept, but that's the fourth slot's irrelevant. I would really just go head smash, acrobatics, and the what's it called? Now head smash, keep in mind, head smash is an egg move. This is the first Pokemon I feel like I've noticed that does actually crucially need an egg move. If I missed any egg moves, it's very, very easy to miss egg moves. Let me know in the comments. That is my favorite kind of correction, is stuff like egg moves. That's really important to not miss out on those. You have to add the egg move onto the Pokemon like before you start breeding up the IV. So if you're going to make an Archeops, please, please, please remember to breed on head smash. I could do a head smash breeding guide as well for Archeops. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. But egg moves are essentially moves that are bred onto the Pokemon by breeding with a specific Pokemon in the same egg group. So if you want to see an Archeops head smash guide, let me know in the comments. If not, there should be a Bulbapedia guide that explains what Pokemon can you can breed with Archeops to teach it head smash. Clicking on the head smash trend, let's talk about one of my favorite Pokemon in all of Pokemon, Rampardos. Now, this guy has actually been really good at certain raids. Very, very simple Pokemon to talk about. You want to go Lonely, Adamant, or Naughty Nature. You want to go 2v2 attack and 2v2 speed. This thing is a glass cannon physical attacker boasting a monstrous 165 base attack, but a middling 58 speed. So you definitely want to bring him in after the Tailwind and a Sweet Scent. He needs a fair bit of setup because you want to have, you know, high attack, high speed, 25 plus, and then head smash. His biggest role is just to hit head smash. He's probably the best head smasher in all of Pokemon. He just gets off an absolutely fat, massive head smash, doing as much damage as a head smash probably could do in all of Pokemon. We see some HMs over here as well. You could go Earthquake on him as well. Earthquake, you might even get a Assurance, but I'd be careful with that. Really, most of the time, you're just going to be hitting head smash. He's just a big boy who hits very, very, very hard. That's all he does. That's really all Rampardos does. Next up is Heracross. Now, I have not used a Heracross myself very much, but I could see him being kind of good just because he's a fighting bug type. His typing is kind of interesting. He's just going to be one of the ones that goes Naughty, Adamant, or Lonely. You just go for the 2v2 attack and 2v2 speed, and then you really just have access to CC and Mega Horn, and then Brick Break is nice if they're setting up screens, but just a utility Pokemon that can... Or sorry, totally not utility Pokemon, excuse me. Just a DPS Pokemon that can do the damage you need in the raid, whether it's a fighting type or bug. It could be good in the future against something like an Umbreon raid that switches the, like, it's reductions. Like, once again, we're talking about certain raids will change what they're weak to. They'll change. So if you, like, attack it with close combat, then it might switch to being resistant to fighting, but it's still going to be, bug is still going to be super effective against it. So then you have that in the backup for it. So next up, was going on to talk about Breloom. Naughty, Lonely, or Adamant Nature, of course. 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31 attack, 31 speed is nice, obviously, 20 plus in defenses. Bulldoze for speed control, close combat, and Bullet Seed. You can actually go, if you're going to go Technician, Bullet Seed, you can go Loaded Die. I think this thing might actually be really, really good in the future. I actually don't have one, hilariously. This thing might become very, 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 very powerful in the future. We just haven't seen many people use it quite yet. This is arguably experimental, but now that Loaded Dice is a thing, which I believe guarantees the move like Bullet Seed to hit the maximum amount of times, they boost the efficacy of multi-strike moves, letting them hit more often. So it just allows it to, on average, I don't know if it's always 5 or like the kind of like the Cloyster ability, or if it just really increases it. Loaded Dice could make something like Bullet Seed plus, you know, fighting types are just good. CC, Breloom, very, very good in the future. I haven't really seen it against too many raids. Arguably could be experimental, but a very cool Pokemon in my opinion. And a lot of people, I put it in core because a lot of them might just have a Breloom sitting around in their boxes because of having a catching Breloom. You could just kind of transfer over into a fighting type Pokemon that you can use for the fighting type raids. It's one of the, you know, weaker quote unquote fighting type Pokemon, but it has a really nice attack stat. It could honestly be very, 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 very good against those fighting type raids. Next up, Whimsicott. This is a Prankster Pokemon. You only want to use Whimsicott if you have access to Prankster. It's just a full utility Pokemon. This thing could be 6 times 0 IVs and it would not matter. This thing does not need stats. It just needs Prankster ability Tailwind, Defog, Memento. Sunny Day is kind of just a slot, and you could replace this with whatever, but the 3 most important moves here are going to be Tailwind, Defog, Memento, and then having something else in the background. You need the Prankster ability. Once again, I cannot say it enough. This Mon is going to be trash without Prankster. You need Prankster. Next up is Porygon-Z. A good gravity Pokemon. I've seen this used against a handful of raids, kind of niche. A really good gravity setter, and then can get off like a hyper beam or a hyper voice or some sort of nice special attack. This thing has a crazy special attack stat of 135, and then 135 special attack plus adaptability. You're never hitting anything for super effective because it's normal type, but you're getting off some disgusting damage, just neutral damage before going down after setting up something like a gravity. And then Cloyster. Cloyster ice types can be good against certain raids, just a pretty powerful offensive typing, which is obviously good. You want offensive typings for raids, not defensive typings. Adamant Cloyster with 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, and then whatever as high you can get on attack and speed. Cloyster does have a really nice defense stat, so like kind of having a higher defense stat is nice if possible, but it's not super crucial. This thing, you want the Skill Link ability, similar to Loaded Die. You want the Skill Link ability and Icicle Spear. That is where this thing super shines. I recommend Ice Shard in the back, just in case you need a priority Ice type move. Ice Shard is a 40 base power, kind of like quick attack, like +1 priority move. So having Ice Shard in the back is nice, but really just Icicle Spear and Ice Shard are the only 2 moves you need on this thing. This thing also doubles as a very good PVM Pokemon for things like the Morimoto fight to make 20k, you know, really quick per day in Castelia City and Unova. You can use it for the Cynthia fight, and you can also use it for trainer reruns, of course, which is another money-making method that makes like 200k an hour. So you can use your trainer rerun Cloyster in raids and other PVM activities. It's a multi-use Pokemon. All right, we are now on the final 4 core raid Pokemon to talk about before moving on to the experimental Pokemon. So I just want to quickly say once again, thank you guys for watching. I know this is a lot of information to digest, and I hope that the timestamps make it much easier, and I hope that you're building some Pokemon, EV training, XP training, doing something on the side as you intake all this information on your second monitor. I want to say thank you for your time. Like the video once again if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you have enjoyed it so far. I want to see more videos like this, and just keep an eye out for more PokeMMO content. Something that's so beautiful about this game is that we have so many content creators in the year 2025, and I always try to shout out those creators and get people to go watch them. People like Cav, people like Young Cabbage, people like you know, Team Rocket or Rocket on YouTube. There's just a lot of amazing people out there doing some amazing stuff, and I want to shout out those people when I have a chance. So check those people out as well as myself for some good PokeMMO content. And let's go ahead and wrap up these core raid Pokemon. So we have our Kingdra over here, Modest Nature. This is really just for a rain team, which rain teams once again have a niche in certain raids, but generally sun teams are just the way to go. But if you're gonna have a rain team, Kingdra is one of your, like, probably the first. You probably go Pelipper, Kingdra, the first 2 Pokemon you use on a rain team. You can also use this in dual use this in PvP as well. Now, it is 250 special defense EVs. I don't know if I assume that's for something very specific. I would just go 252 speed just to have it be usable in PvP as well, and probably usable against most raids if you're going to use a rain team at raids. But you want to go Modest Nature, 252 special attack, 252 speed EVs, and then 31 speed is going to be pretty important on this thing, especially if you're double using it in PvP, to make sure you can outspeed or speed tie other Kingdras. So if you plan on using this in PvP, go 31 speed for sure. 25 plus in every other stat is nice. You want Hydro Pump, Brine, Draco Meteor, and this moveset's honestly perfect. I would go exactly this moveset: Hydro Pump, Brine, Draco Meteor, and Ice Beam, and then you're abusing the Swift Swim ability in Rain to be able to outspeed everything effectively. So you do like Choice Specs or something like this to increase damage, essentially. Kingdra is one of the most menacing Pokemon probably the most menacing Pokemon under Rain in all of PokeMMO. Next up, Mamoswine, a beautiful offensive Pokemon, which is what Raids is all about. A nice little ice ground type with access to Icicle Crash, Ice Shard, Earthquake, and Superpower, doing really decent damage. Mamoswine is just a really cool Pokemon. 130 attack, 80 speed is enough. You want to go Adamant Nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, 31 speed maybe, because it's 80 speed, so you might want to invest in that 31 speed, and then go 25 plus in every other defense stat and attack. And then for obviously the moveset like we talked about: Earthquake, Ice Crash, Ice Shards. I think this is a perfect moveset. I would definitely just go ahead and rock this. And Thick Fat is nice. You could go Oblivious as well, but the ability is not going to factor in for most raids too much. Next up, we have Crawdaunt, which I did use against a certain raid at one point. Just a very unique typing of Pokemon with access to Water and Dark Stab with adaptability, which is super, super nice. I wouldn't recommend... I'm sure Fling is here for some specific reason, but I believe I went... when I used him, I believe I used Crab Hammer and Night Slash, or so whatever the most powerful Crunch, whatever the most powerful physical dark type move he has access to, which I'm guessing is Crunch. So you probably want to go, or Assurance if he has access to it, is probably very, very, very good. But yeah, you probably want to go Crab Hammer, Crunch. Waterfall is nice as a backup to Crab Hammer if you don't have the boosted accuracy. Surf is never needed on this thing. It's not a special attacker at all. It's a physical attacker. You want Adamant Nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, and then high attack and speed. Keep in mind, adaptability is a hidden ability, so you do need hidden ability access, and it's going to up, like, it's what makes Crawdaunt good. Adaptability is going to up his damage tremendously. So please, if you make a Crawdaunt, make sure it has hidden ability access. And then next up is Venusaur. I think that this Pokemon is kind of underrated. This one's not a great example because it's missing a few things, which I'll talk about in a quick sec, but this Venusaur is modest. You definitely want to go these stats. Modest, 252 attack, 252 speed, and then just as good as IVs you can get. 20 plus in defense is just nice on a Venusaur, and then 25 plus special attack and speed, of course. Venusaur's speed and damage should be enough, but it gets boosted where Venusaur shines, in my opinion, where it could shine in the future. This is a kind... I switched Venusaur back and forth between experimental and core multiple times. I have not seen Venusaur been good in a raid yet, but I really feel like he could be really, really good in an upcoming raid. The reason being is because of hidden ability access, Chlorophyll, so it's really good in Sun. Keep in mind, you definitely want to use this thing under Sun, but I could see people using this and having to not worry about Tailwind would be super, super nice. So having Chlorophyll Venusaur, if you choose to make this, with Frenzy Plant and Energy Ball. Frenzy Plant's the grass equivalent of Blast Burn and Hydro Cannon. And then ignore Growth and Razor Leaf. These are just not slotted in moves, but things like Energy Ball, things like Frenzy Plant, Giga Drain could work depending. The move that's not here that's really good is Sweet Scent. The fact that Venusaur can set up Sweet Scent and fix accuracies and then throw off a Frenzy Plant or an Energy Ball or whatever afterwards, I think is very, very good and kind of underrated. It can also set up screens like Reflect or Light Screen if you want to. It can set up its own Sunny Day. I kind of think this Pokemon could be very, very good in the future against certain specific raids. So keep an eye out for Venusaur. That is the final core raid Pokemon I wanted to talk about, but we still have a lot of experimental Pokemon to talk about. And I'm going to be 100% honest, I organized these two boxes myself, so I could be wrong here. There might be certain Pokemon in the experimental boxes where someone's like, hey, I used that Pokemon in raids and it was actually amazing, so you're actually totally wrong. And like, I appreciate some respectful, polite disagreement in the comments, but don't go around calling me stupid or anybody else stupid in the comments because they may disagree where you slot in a Pokemon in terms of how important it is to raids. But let's go ahead and just get started. Let's start talking about some of the more experimental raid Pokemon that are still very good. Some of these might just be meta in certain raids. I may just not be as familiar with them. And then on top of it, I am going to try to go through these a bit quicker and not spend so much time on each individual Pokemon like I did for the core raid Pokemon. I'm going to try to sort these Pokemon by typing. So if you're looking for specific types of Pokemon, that should be mapped out in the timestamp. So we're going to start off with fire type Pokemon. These could very well be backup Pokemon. You see a fire fighting, which I've talked about is pretty good. These are totally fine Pokemon to use on Sun teams. If you already have these Pokemon built for whatever reason, instead of the other ones mentioned, you could absolutely slot these into your Sun teams. Magmortar is interesting because it's a Vital Spirit Pokemon like I talked about with Primeape, and Vital Spirit Monster that can avoid being put to sleep can actually be really, really good against certain raids. So I can see Magmortar being super, super good, but let's go ahead and talk about these. Emboar, it seems like you go full physical. You could go mixed, I believe, on Emboar looking over at its special attack or its base stats, but you want to go physical based on its move pool. And its attack stat is 23. It's notably higher than its special attack, but you could technically go mixed or special on it. So very, very simple DPS Pokemon. Magmortar going Modest, Emboar going Adamant, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed versus 2v2 physical attack, 2v2 speed, and then here's the IVs, of course. Emboar just rocking the 31 attack, 31 speed. Magmortar rocking really good special attack, really good speed, and then decent enough defenses. The base stats here can actually be a little bulky. Same with Emboar, I believe. These can be kind of bulky, the 110 HP, so having that 20 plus defenses is nice. But as we can see here, Magmortar is going to rock things like Overheat, Heat Wave, Flamethrower, Fire Blast could be on here. Acid Spray, I assume. I think this is just to harshly lower the opponent's special defense stat. So this actually is a decent move to include on this thing. And then once again, Vital Spirit. I think if you're going to make a Magmortar, I would definitely go ahead and go, well, it could be Flame Body. You could go for that honestly, that Flame proc. And then Emboar. You know, we talked about the stats, everything. Flare Blitz, Close Combat, and Head Smash. Head Smash might be an egg move. I'd be really shocked if it's not an egg move. It's actually not an egg move. What? That's very, very funny to me. So, yeah, Head Smash to your Heart's Delight. Yeah, that's awesome. That's honestly really, really cool. So there you go. Reckless being the ability you actually want on Emboar. Hidden ability access, boosting that head smash damage even more, and Flare Blitz, which is super nice. You can also go Wild Charge on this, I believe. There's a lot of mons like this that kind of have that moveset. This one might not get Wild Charge. We will double check. It does. So you could do Wild Charge as well if you want coverage, but you likely don't need the extra coverage. Next up are the dragon types. We have 3 to talk about, one being Dragonite, one being Salamence, and one being Haxorus. The Salamence and the Dragonite here are built special, which is kind of interesting. You could go physical, you could go special. I'm going to be so honest, I feel like dragon types might be, at least currently, dragon types are probably the worst Pokemon typing in raids, just because they aren't really super effective against anything, obviously, aside from other dragons. It's just not that good. I, in full honesty, wouldn't really recommend people build probably any of these unless you want to for fun, but these are still raid Pokemon that To Jejgunz sent me, so I'm just going to honestly slideshow through some of these really quickly. Rash Nature Dragonite, 2v2 Spatak, 2v2 Speed, Draco Meteor Hurricane, Flamethrower, maybe this could be like Surf or something like that instead of Aqua Tail. Salamence we have over here, Modest. This is the Spidget OT though, so that actually does make the Salamence that much stronger, to be fair. Modest Nature, 2v2 Spatak, 2v2 Speed, 31 Spatak, 31 Speed, just a special attacker, Absolute Blaster. Draco Meteor Hurricane can set up Rain Dance itself. I don't know why Crunch, I assume it's just, it doesn't move set fully. Haxorus, Dragon Claw, Scizor, Brick Break. I feel like if any of these mons are going to be good in raids, it's probably Haxorus, just because this thing has a 147 attack stat. You can set up Tailwind to make up for this. If any of these mons are going to be good, it's probably Haxorus, just throwing off massive like Dragon Claws or Dragon Rushes with Sweet Scent access. If you have that up to like fix the accuracy. If it gets Dragon Rush, honestly, I'm not even sure. But out of, I don't even see it. Yeah, I'm not sure. Out of all these Pokemon, I don't think it gets Dragon Rush. Out of all these mons, I feel like Haxorus is the most viable. Does it also get Mold Breaker? Mold Breaker could absolutely be relevant in certain fights where you need to get through like Levitate or something like that without having access to gravity for some reason. Or you could use Rivalry. Like this one abuses Rivalry, which is really good if you know the gender of the raid. I could see Haxorus being the best out of these due to just the raw power. But none of these are exactly, or not even exactly, none of these are good raid mons right now. But that is the beauty of raids. Even though I'm going over like what is the meta right now and what I recommend people building right now, all of this is subject to change in the future. The whole point of raids in PokeMMO is they can permanently keep adding new raids to the game and always shake things up. The meta will constantly be adjusting. What are good raid mons will constantly be adjusting. And I'll try to keep updating things like that in the description. But obviously, as of the time you're watching this, unless the description or title says otherwise, this should be a pretty good video that covers all raid Pokemon. It should not be outdated unless it says so in the description or title. Okay. Moving on, Ice type Pokemon. Ice types can be a good offensive type. They can be good in raids. It wouldn't surprise me if a Snow Warning, setting up Ice, Blizzard spam, it would not surprise me if one of the next, breakout good raid teams is a Blizzard spamming team. Like I think setting up Snow with Vanillix and spamming Blizzard can actually just be really, really, really powerful. So I'm going to quickly go over the sets. These are all special attackers. I believe it's Cryogonal. Ignore this is just a mod, the Jumpion mod, the classic meme in PokeMMO. I have a history of Jumpion video if you're interested, but this is, for all intents and purposes, a Cryogonal. Vanillix, you want to go Modest, 252. I'm sure all of these are the same exact build. Modest, yep, Modest on all of them. Glaceon, Vanillix, Cryogonal, 252 Spatak, 252 Speed. IVs are going to look like this. That's funny that when you spin it, okay, there we go. Sure, whatever. You want to have as high special attack as possible and as high speed as possible. What is Cryogonal speed? Is it fast enough? Yep, it's good. Glaceon is the slowest out of these three, I believe, at 65. So you might want to prioritize a 31 speed on the Glaceon. And then other than that, if you're going to rock this team, my guess would be that you're pretty much just here to set up Snow with Vanillix, lead with Vanillix, and then spam Blizzard on everything else. That's probably it for this team. Next up, we have our Psychic types. For this, we have a Reuniclus and a Gardevoir. Now, a Reuniclus used to be one of the most powerful Pokemon in raids when, like, stored power and bulking up and long fights were the metagame. However, it's fallen off tremendously, but if you were going to rock a Reuniclus like that, I would go ahead and, personally, if I were you, I would go ahead and go, you probably do want Magic Guard, I believe, for the ability. Yeah, you do want Magic Guard, I assume. You want Magic Guard, you want probably a relaxed, you probably want a plus defense or plus special defense nature. Let me go actually see if I can find you guys a Reuniclus in my boxes to show you. I feel like that would be a better example, because I feel like I don't think this Reuniclus that I'm showing is going to have any usage in raids, or at least something like this. Let's go ahead and see. Something like this could at least be useful at some point in a raid, or it has been in the past. So here is a example of Reuniclus that has been meta in the past and could be meta against certain raids. Relaxed nature Reuniclus, 2v2 HP EVs, 2v2 special defense, and then the best defense. This is 18 special attack. You really would like the special attack to be 25 plus, so ignore that. But high defenses, high HP is super, super important on this Pokemon. What you would do is you would set up Iron defenses, you would set up Calm Minds, recover up this, keep healthy, have a teammate set up screens to help you do this, and then go ahead and just throw off stored powers. And if you got set up, you were just unkillable. It was impossible to lose the raid. So that Reuniclus could be useful in certain raids. You're looking for experimental mons or old mons that were meta at certain times. Next up is Gardevoir. Modest nature. I don't know what this thing's... The problem is, I don't know if Gardevoir has a, like, advantage over other Psychic types. It has 125 special attack, 80 speed. I don't know why you would ever go Gardevoir. Maybe the move pool. The move pool is very, very utility, but this one's just full attacking. So yeah, my guess would be you would probably end up going this thing in a raid if you needed like Heal Pulse or Healing Wish or something like weird like that. I don't see Gardevoir really being meta. Memento maybe if you want to breed on an egg move. I don't see Gardevoir being good at the current time. Maybe a fast Trick Roomer if you needed that. But Psychic, Shadow Ball, this one is just set up as modest, 2v2 Spatak, 2v2 speed, good attacking, IVs, special attack and speed, and then Psychic, Shadow Ball, Ice Beam, and Aura Sphere. I think Gardevoir's main use could be abusing its Synchronize ability. If there's ever a raid that at the start of the fight, it like burns you or paralyzes you, you could lead with Synchronized Gardevoir to also put that onto the opponent, the raid boss. That's the main use I could see, the main niche I could see for Gardevoir. Next up, we have electric types, which we have a full 6 to talk about, and there are some actually really good ones in here. For example, Minun and Plusle, kind of used alongside Ampharos sometimes, abusing that plus and minus ability. Now, if you don't have that ability, it becomes kind of useless, so I wouldn't recommend going Voltobzord. You really, really want the minus/plus ability. Here is a Minun that is mild nature, 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed, just decent enough Spatak, decent enough speed, and then Thunderbolt. Signal Beam is really nice coverage. Charm is sometimes used against certain raids, so you could see that there as well, but a pretty simple Pokemon. Next up is Manectric. Manectric is the king of coverage, but doesn't exactly do anything amazingly, which is why it's not that good in raids. But we see a modest Manectric here. This would be a decent, if you have a Manectric made, can be a beautiful slot in for electric teams, but it's not one of the best, but it's very, very usable. Very, very usable in raids for an electric team. Modest nature, 2v2 Spatak, 2v2 speed, high special attack, high speed, it's really frail, so the 20 plus in the defense don't really matter, honestly. Now, I would recommend, if you're running Manectric, I think the main benefits is the coverage. You can run things like, I think it's Giga Drain. I know you can run Flamethrower on it is a big one. Being able to run Flamethrower on this thing is absolutely huge. Being able to run, you can do Overheat on it. You could do Signal Beam, of course. It has Switcheroo, I guess. This thing is not, it's not that amazing. It's not that amazing, but it also, to be fair, it does get the minus ability, minus/plus ability. So, as a hidden ability, and it doesn't mention that in the Pokedex. There are very few Pokemon in PokeMMO that have access to their hidden ability where the Pokedex doesn't mention it quite yet. So I guess that's one thing massively to keep in mind. Manectric does get the minus/plus hidden ability, but it doesn't say so in the Pokedex yet. So that is a something to definitely keep in mind. Next up is Luxray. A decent slot in if you have one made into an electric team. I mean, Luxray is one of the biggest failures in Pokemon. You know, people love it, I know, but it's not that good. It's a cursed physical attacking electric type, which is just never that great, unfortunately. But Luxray could be good. I could definitely see Luxray being good in the future. If for some reason there's some like, I could totally see Luxray being really good against like a Mantine raid or something where like Mantine, I believe, is a, I always forget if I believe Mantine is a special defense wall. I could super see, honestly, Luxray being really good against Mantine, where you want to specifically hit it with physical electric types attached. So I could see Luxray being a decent Pokemon there. Adamant Nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, 25 plus attack and speed, and then 20 plus in defenses. Wild Charge is going to be crucial. Discharge is a special type attack, so I would ignore this. You're probably going full physical on this thing. You want Wild Charge. This is also special, so ignore Signal Beam. But you probably go Wild Charge, Crunch, and then whatever other coverage or whatever other utility moves we could throw onto this thing. Superpower is probably a nice slot-in move. And then something like Fake Tears could be nice if your team needs it, but I feel like if you're using a physical attacker, you probably don't. The last move is kind of whatever, but I would definitely go for that Superpower on that third move. This is definitely one of those Pokemon that is banking on the Rivalry ability. There's a lot of theory crafting around Rivalry and on kind of trying to find a team that could work really well against certain raids because you know the gender going into the fight or whatever, or you would like a Pokemon that has like a 100% chance of being female, like a Chansey raid or something like that, or a Pokemon that has a 100% chance of being a male. So this is a female Luxray. So you'd want to use this against like a Chansey or other females because it deals more damage to the same gender. This would not be good against like a Tauros. But you could have like male rivalry Pokemon for like the Tauros fight because that's a male only Pokemon. Just something to keep in mind. There are people out there who are theory crafting for Rivalry. Next up is a Rotom Freeze, Rotom, what is it? Rotom, what are they even called? Rotom Fridge, Rotom Ice. I don't even remember what this thing's called. Anyways, Rotom Modest Nature, 252 attack, 252 speed is just not done being EV trained. I've not seen this thing be good in raids, but to be honest, if ice type teams like the Blizzard teams become a thing, this would slot in there for sure. This would actually be really good on those ice type teams, having access to Levitate and being able to defog or set up screens while also spamming Blizzard. This could actually be super good if ice type teams pop up, of course. Next up is Plusle, the exact same thing to Minun, just rocking the plus ability. It's going to be plus special attack nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, decent enough IVs, and then discharge and thunder plus some sort of utility move like Fake Tears here is fantastic. Just make sure you have that plus ability and make sure you're only using Plusle and Minun if your team is coordinated and also has those Pokemon out. Next up is a Pikachu. Now, Pikachu, once again, if you ever need a physical attacking electric team, Pikachu can actually be really solid. I feel like I've actually used a Pikachu on certain raids, so maybe it should be higher up. But keep in mind, if you're making a Pikachu, you absolutely need Volt Tackle. And Volt Tackle is one of the weirdest moves to learn in Pokemon. You have to breed Pikachu with a light ball on it, consuming the light ball, and then that will teach Pikachu Volt Tackle, okay? It's very complicated. It's not that complicated, but it's a little annoying because you have to everyone do that at the start of the breed before you breed any IVs or natures onto it. But if you do that, you end up with Volt Tackle, which is a 120 base power electric physical move, which every other physical electric type Pokemon desperately needs. And you can put a light ball on Pikachu. Pikachu is actually a very strong Pokemon. even though its stats don't show it. Light Ball doubles both of its attack and special attack, so you end up with 110 base, and then it's doubling its base, like its actual stats, so you get like a much higher attack stat than you would realize on a Pikachu. Going Lonely Nature, going the Vault Tackle, having, you know, high attack, high speed, and then Vault Tackle. Vault Tackle Brick Break is nice to break screens, and then Extreme Speed could be nice for certain fights, but it's pretty expensive. To learn Extreme Speed on Pikachu, you have to use BP, so keep that in mind if you want to get Extreme Speed on Pikachu. I think it costs like 9,000 BP. So you have to get some battle points, either from Elite Four reruns or PvP or something like that. To you should get some free BP just for defeating all the. You get like 3,500 BP from each Elite Four from defeating it for the first time. So if you never spent your BP from the storyline, you will actually have 3,500 BP times 5 if you completed all 5, just laying around in your trainer card. Next up is grass types, where some of these Pokemon have actually already been good at a few raids and definitely could slot into future teams, especially sun teams that could utilize the fact that these mons are grass types and not fire types, abusing things like Solar Power Sunflora or other chlorophyll Pokemon. So let's just talk about it. First things first is Modest, Contrary Superior, definitely a Pokemon you want to have hidden ability access onto. However, since it is a starter Pokemon, you can actually go ahead and use a grass ability patch over on the GTL, which might be a cheaper way. It depends on the market, but it could be a cheaper way for you to turn already competitive superior that you have into a contrary one, so you don't have to breed a whole new one from scratch. But here's what superior looks like. Its main strength is spamming Leaf Storm with Contrary. So instead of reducing your special attack, it's a 130 base power grass type special attack that raises your special attack by 2, which is super powerful. So that's Superior's main one thing, but that one thing is very strong. You want to go Modest, 252 attack, 252 speed, and then 25 plus special attack. Probably 31 speed is probably not that relevant. Just 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, 20 plus in all the defenses, and then you have to have Leaf Storm plus Contrary. Reflect and Light Screen are nice, and then the other move is kind of, you can slot in whatever. This is definitely a Pokemon that can be multi-used as a good PvP Pokemon in OU as well as raids, which is always nice. Next up is an Executor. This mon would really only be good if you have Chlorophyll in like a Sun team. But if you do have that, you would go Modest Nature. You would go 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. Executor is a really cool Pokemon, but it's just, its speed is really brutal. It has an interesting typing being Grass and Psychic. It's just not quite powerful enough a lot of the time. But you would go those EVs. 25 plus special attack, probably hopefully 31 speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses is nice. You would go Chlorophyll, you would go Leaf Storm, Giga Drain, Psychic. I like this moveset a lot. Toxic would probably be slotted in for something else. Next up is Sceptile. You can go physical or special on Sceptile most of the time. It kind of depends on what you want to do. Its moveset is kind of more geared for physical a lot of the time, but this one is special, so let's keep that in mind. You could go either, depending on what you need, a physical or special attacking grass type Pokemon. This one is Rash, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31, and then Energy Ball, Frenzy Plant, and Giga Drain. Whatever coverage else move you could have here. I can't imagine Sceptile being that amazing, in all honesty. Its main use might be going like Unburden plus Acrobatics and then having a Flying Gem. So you use Acrobatics with Flying Gem, get the massive boosted damage there, as well as getting the Unburden proc to raise your speed. That would be my best guess on something like a Sceptile usage. Now, Sunflora can actually be good. The problem is you kind of need it in Trick Room. I kind of feel like its 30 speed is way too slow even for Tailwind. Like this has to be a Trick Room Sun team, which is a lot of utility, a lot of like utility spots and stuff to set up just for it to be as good as other things, you know? So Sunflora is a cool Pokemon. It actually can do like insane damage just because Solar Power is so good. So if you do make a Sunflora, make sure it is a hidden ability, I believe, for Solar. I think it's a hidden ability. No, I'm sorry. A normal ability, excuse me. Make sure it's Solar Power. That's its much better ability, in my personal opinion. You want to go Mild, Modest, or Rash. 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, and then invest in special attack and speed. If you're Trick Room, you want to go HP. If you're Trick Room, you probably go 2v2 attack, 2v2 HP. Excuse that Windows alert, excuse me. And then you'll probably go something like Solar Beam. You could go Giga Drain. I wouldn't go Leech Seed or Synthesis. You could go Sludge Bomb or other things here. Maybe Sweet Scent, used as a bit of a utility Pokemon as well. It has access to Safeguard, which is nice, or it could set up its own Sunny Days. It's a niche Pokemon, but I could honestly see it having a use. Next up are experimental water types. We have 8 or so to talk about, so some of the most out of all the typings. First things first is Clamperl. I love Clamperl. I would love this Pokemon to be meta in a certain raid. So if you don't know, the gimmick with Clamperl, look at these stats. This Pokemon is terrible, right? Unbelievably horrible Pokemon. So what makes it usable? What makes it usable is the item Deep Sea Tooth, which is super, super cheap. And it doubles, I believe, Clamperl's special attack. So it takes it from a 74 all the way up to what, like 140. What's the math on that? 148? A 148 special attack. That is ridiculously high. So using Deep Sea, is it stale? Deep Sea Tooth on Clamperl is the only way you can make this thing at all usable. I'll never forget when I was swept by a Deep Sea Tooth Clamperl in a Trick Room team in NU. I was never more embarrassed and more impressed at the same exact time. So you're definitely going to want like Brine and Scald if it gets access to it. For sure. Rash, Nature, plus some sort of special attack, 252 attack, 252 speed. You want to do as much damage as possible. If there's ever a trick room water type team, that's where this thing, but it has such low speed. You're never making up for this. I would honestly maybe go 252. You probably still just go 252 speed, even in Trick Room, because it's that slow. Maybe HP, but like, I don't know if the bulk is ever going to matter, to be honest. It's just so frail as well. This thing just wants to get off some sort of attack once and do a ton of damage. That's Clamperl, very funny Pokemon. Next up is Starmie. Starmie definitely could be good in a certain raid. It's a little too... It's too much of an all-around good Pokemon. It's very good in PvP, not that good in raids. Really good in PvP, really good in PVM. A lot of other PVM, like Elite Four reruns or Trainer reruns or, something like that, or Battle Tower. But it doesn't really have a spot in raids because it doesn't do enough damage. It doesn't really do enough damage. There's not really a reason to go Starmie over other, higher damage water-type Pokemon. But if you do want to build one, which it could be versatile as well, and just a cool Pokemon, there's nothing wrong with going Starmie. It's just slightly suboptimal at the moment. You would go Modest, 252 attack, 252 speed, as high special attack and speed as possible. If you want to double use this in PvP, that's probably the best reason to have a raid Starmie is to use it both in PvP and raids or PVM. You definitely want to go 31 speed. 31 speed, you could even go Timid for anyone who's in PvP. 31 speed, Timid Starmie is usually very, very relevant in PvP. From what I recall, at least. You probably want like Hydro Pump, Brine. Do you want both of these? For PVM, you definitely want Brine, or for raids rather. You could go Scald, you could go Thunderbolt, Psychic is nice, Psyshock is nice, Steel Swap, etc., etc. There's not really... Starmie's not amazing right now, but I could see it being okay in the future. And then in terms of ability, you could go Natural Cure. The abilities, all the abilities are kind of whatever in raids, to be honest. Next up is Vaporeon. Vaporeon can have a place because of Water Absorb. Like there's certain raids that if most of their attacks are water type attacks, it can essentially just make Vaporeon like immune, which is really nice and undamageable. And if it's tanky enough, it's hard to kill. Jejgunz went Modest, which I'd recommend. Modest, 256 attack, 236 special defense. So he went Balti on this, which I respect. I could see that being really good against certain raids, like Suicune, for example. This is probably really good against Suicune. 25 plus in all the defenses. The bulk on Vaporeon is very, very important. It's mostly a bulky water than a high damage and fast water. As you can see, it's pretty bulky with that 130 HP and 95 speed def. So Modest, 2v2 attack, 236 speed def. I would bet you this speed is important. If you're gonna build one of these, I would go the 22 speed. I'm assuming it's like calced for something very important. I imagine the double edge is irrelevant. You could put Safeguard or something else here. But the Brine, Hydro Pump, and Fake Tears are definitely probably very important. I would probably go Water Absorb over Hydration, but maybe Hydration was used for some certain raid that it was used at. Next up is Samurott. Once again, kind of a bulky water, not quite fast enough, doesn't do quite enough damage, so it's not great for raids, but it's a bulky water that can be used for something. Modest, Nature, Samurott, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. It just goes full damage on this. 31 attack, 31 speed, Hydro Cannon, Brine, Surf. I don't know what this thing has. I don't know if this thing does have anything that makes it special compared to other water types. Sorry, Samurott, at least for raids. Next up is Gorobis. This thing at least has Swift Swim. So under Rain, Gorobis can absolutely be a Pokemon that you consider. Rocking a 114 special attack stat with a 52 speed that can be doubled with that Swift Swim, Gorobis could be a threat. You have mild, modest, or rash nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, very simple, full damage. Water type, you would go Brine, Hydro Pump, Surf. I don't know much about Captivate. If it's the opposite gender, it lowers the special attack. That could be relevant in certain raids. I'm sure there's a bunch of other... You could do like, a bunch of other like random little utility moves on this Pokemon if you would like. Is that just to Safeguard if that pops up? And is that just to like Psychic if you need that? It can set up Rain Dance with its own, Rain Dance. It's a neat Pokemon that I could see having a niche. Next up is Mantine, another neat Pokemon that does some unique things that I could see having a niche. I feel like Water Absorb is probably the best ability here. If you have Tailwind or something like that set up, you could go Swift Swim if you're doing a no Tailwind run, but this is mostly going to be like a Water Absorber against other Water type raids. So this Mantine is Careful Nature. That's interesting. We'll see if is it just full utility? Gotcha. So the thing is full utility. I wonder if this is used against... I know certain Water Sport Mons are used against Heatran, I believe. This might be full utility. Prevents Mon from getting a burn. I don't know how relevant that is. This one is Careful Nature, I will say. Careful Nature. I'd probably go minus attack. I would go the minus attack plus special defense nature instead of this, personally. AKA Calm. I would definitely go Calm on this personally over Careful, just so you can still have it as like a Scald spammer if need be. But this one is Careful. 2v2 HP, 2v2 Spidef is fantastic. Just you want the bulk. You do need the bulk on this thing. 20 plus in all the defenses, 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed. This thing is full utility. Helping Hand, Wide Guard, Tailwind, Water Sport. And then we have two more water types to cover, being Slowbro and Corsola. So the Slowbro is this is like a Trick Room. I assume this would be like another Trick Room. So there's a really good like Trick Room water team forming. We just need some raid where that's actually a good strategy / team. But for this, you would go Modest Nature, 2v2 special attack, 2v2 defense or HP, depending on like if you're doing it against a physical attack and raid. This is probably fantastic. And then having decent enough IVs. You want the 20 plus HP if possible. Just a decent enough bulk, decent enough. So you don't really the speed's probably irrelevant here if you're running Trick Room. If anything, you might want like a slow team. I would probably run this thing on a Trick Room water team if that ever pops up in raids. Own Tempo is probably fine. / whatever ability there is probably fine. You probably want this to be a Trick Room setter, would be my guess. You probably want Trick Room, you probably want Surf or Scald, Psychic, Rain Dance is fine. This should just work out decently in that team if that ever pops up. Next up is Corsola. This is I've not seen this Pokemon. I have no idea. It's a hustle Pokemon, which I do love that ability. I'm just gonna read what is on this. Lonely Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31 attack, 31 speed, Head Smash, Corsola. I don't think this would be good, but I love it. Next up are some steel type Pokemon. So talking about Metagross. Metagross probably the best steel type Pokemon in raids that has been used many times against certain raids. There is an Iron Defense set that I'll show you guys as well after this, but this one is just Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. Metagross is kind of a slow Pokemon, so making up for its speed. 70, honestly better than I expected. Having Tailwind up with this thing going to be super important. Really good stats. 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, and 20 plus in the defenses. Meteor Mash and Psycho Cut being its best physical attacks. Explosion is interesting. Heavy Slam is interesting. And then once again, if the defensive meta ever comes back up, keep an eye out for Iron Defense. Yeah, these Metagrosses were very good against the original first few PokeMMO raids. Iron Defense, Meteor Mash, Hammer Arm, and Earthquake was a very good set. You would go like a mix of bulk. And just, these are very good against the initial raids. And then next up, we have an Aggron with Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 252 speed, and then just trying to go for some damage, I guess. It's a 50 speed stat Pokemon, so this could only be really brought against slow raids with yourself having access to Tailwind. It has Head Smash, Earthquake, Whirlpool to keep it trapped, I guess, and then Heavy Slam would probably just be Head Smash and Earthquake being the two most important moves here. Maybe Heavy Slam as well for stab. I don't know of a place where Aggron is good at the moment. but we're going to keep that in mind. Next up is Steelix, Impish. These are just, we're getting really into experimental territory. That could be good in the future. Steelix, Impish Nature, 2v2 HP, 2v2 Spadef, and then really good stats all around. You just don't need special attack on Steelix is the main thing. Earthquake, Wide Guard, Mud Sport. Haven't seen this been useful in raids yet, but I definitely could see that at some point being relevant. Next up are ghost types, and one of the most relevant ghost types I could see becoming really good in raids personally is Cofagrigus. I've actually been keeping an eye out on this Pokemon. It's just a very, very difficult to kill Pokemon. It can give the raid Pokemon the Mummy ability, which is a pain in the butt, which essentially takes away the raid Pokemon's ability, which is very, very relevant. This one is Modest Nature, 2v2 Attack, 2v2 Speed, decent enough IVs, 25 plus in pretty much everything except for attack is probably relevant. And then this thing goes, this is a Trick Room setter, Trick Room, Shadow Ball, Hex, you know, some other things. I have a Cofagrigus I've been working on personally over in my boxes somewhere. It's like untrained and stuff like that. Yeah, it's over here, but I think it's very, very possible a defensive bulky Cofagrigus could become meta in certain future raids. I have Haze here, I have Will-O-Wisp. It's not fully moveset, but I would definitely keep these two things, and then maybe go Trick Room, maybe go like Reflector, Light Screen if it has access to screens. But Kofa is a very unique Pokemon and a tricky Pokemon to deal with. I could super see it becoming meta later down the road in raids at some point. And then other than Kofa, we have Gengar. Gengar has not been good in raids yet, but I could totally see a situation where it's really good against certain Pokemon. It has the damage and it has the speed. There just hasn't been a raid where ghost types or poison types have been super good against that yet. But Gengar could totally be good in the future. Very simple, high special attack damaging Pokemon. So you want mild, modest, or rash. You would go 2v2 Spadak, 2v2 speed, and then high, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses is nice. You would just go Shadow Ball, Sludge Bomb, and then honestly the other two moves are probably open for interpretation. Very simple, high damage Ghost Mon / Poison Mon, but this could be one of the like out of the experimental mons, one of the ones that is good in the future. Next up we have Miss Magius. Kind of similar situation to Gengar, but lacking damage, but having more utility in its move pool with things like Fake Tears. These are not fully moveset once again. So we have things, we have Rash, Rash, mild or modest here. 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and 20 plus in the defenses. And then Shadow Ball, Fake Tears, and then whatever else would slot in here depending on, I bet you that this would depend on what Pokemon you're fighting against is going to massively affect what other utility moves you slot in here. But you do have things like Memento as an egg move, which is relevant. You have things like Heal Bell, which hasn't come up yet as a relevant raid move, but it absolutely could, I would guess, in the future. T-Waving sometimes can be relevant on certain turns. You could go ahead and set up Trick Room with this if you need to. This could definitely be a good, fast-attacking utility Ghost-type mon in the future. Next up is Bug types. Probably the type that I think is least likely to ever become good in raids. I'm sorry, maybe Durant. Durant is probably the most likely out of all of them. What you would probably do with Durant is go Hustle ability. You would most likely go Hustle, and you would use a teammate using Gravity or Sweet Scent to increase or decrease the evasiveness of your opponent, allowing Hustle to essentially just boost the damage on your attacks for free without having to deal with that lowered accuracy. So I think Hustle Durant honestly could be very, very good at certain times, especially with being like a really nice, he's one of the few like good offensive steel types, having that 109 base attack of 109 base speed. I could see Durant becoming honestly quite good at certain raids. Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 31 attack, 31 speed. Honestly, the defenses are probably irrelevant. X-Scissor, fantastic. Iron Head, fantastic. The other moves are probably just, slot-ins. Next up, we have Scolipede. I don't see this Pokemon, it's not moveset at all except for Megahorn. I don't see this Pokemon becoming good because it relies on speed boost, and I feel like speed is just covered by other means in raid type Pokemon. But if you wanted to build one, Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, really simple stats. Really good in PvP, could be used outside of raids, but I would not recommend building a Scolipede for raids right now. There's Ariados as well. Ariados' main benefit, in my opinion, is just being another Sucker Punch Pokemon. This really doesn't have Sucker Punch, but Sucker Punch, it does have a prevent falling asleep ability, which is always kind of relevant. You do want to keep that in mind. I could see a world where Ariados becomes relevant. You have access to Bug Bite, being able to eat certain berries, which is very, very important. Rage Powder could be very important, sacrificing your Ariados. I could honestly see Ariados becoming relevant, weirdly enough, in raids, more likely than like Scolipede, hilariously. This one is Adamant, 252 attack, 252 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, 20 plus in the defenses. I would go Rage Powder, Bug Bite. You probably want Sucker Punch here. And then the other, maybe like Mega Horn, is probably just a decent stab move or whatever. This could, once again, this is flexible, but I could see Ariados having a niche somewhere. And then next up is Escavalier. Escavalier really only could be good, in my opinion, again, like a Trick Room team, and there just hasn't been that many successful. There's been a few successful Trick Room teams against certain raids, but it's a lot of effort to coordinate and put together that Trick Room team. This one, if you're wondering, is Lonely, so plus attack nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed. I would probably go if I were to build Escavalier for raids, I would go Balti, and I would go like 2v2 attack, 2v2 HP, and I would make sure my defense IVs are good, so HP, defense, special defense, and then probably like Scizor, Iron Head, and then whatever coverage moves, whatever else you need in the other 2 slots, depending on what raid you're fighting. All right, Omastar somehow got sorted over with the rock types when he definitely should have been with the water types. So excuse this, but Omastar is definitely a water type Pokemon that could be relevant. I think was relevant. I think I did actually use Omastar for one raid over the past 2 or 3 years or so, over the past 2 years since they've been in the game. So I've definitely used Omastar. It can be a powerful Pokemon, having Swift Swim, being a pretty nice, like, 115 special attacking water type Pokemon. You have to make up for the low speed with Swift Swim and or Tailwind, but you can go Modest Nature like this, 2v2 special attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in the defenses. The bulk is nice. Brine, Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, Ancient Power, perfect moveset, perfect Omastar, can absolutely be a threatening Swift Swim Pokemon. Now on to ground types. It's very possible Marowak becomes good at some point for a few different reasons, actually. It could be a Lightning Rod Pokemon with hidden ability access. So Lightning Rod makes you immune to electricity and boosts your special attack, but that's obviously the boosting special attacks are relevant for Marowak. It's more of Marowak is a slow physical attacking ground type. However, what it can do is Lightning Rod also attracts electric type moves to it instead of hitting your teammates. So if you're against an electric type raid, or they have some sort of electric type coverage move, and you want to protect your teammates, you could simply bring one Marowak and then even have like a Gyarados or other mons that are weak to electric on your team, but have, if you need that for some reason, but have a Marowak to suck up all the electric type attack. And I think with Lightning Rod could definitely become relevant against electric type Pokemon, electric type raids in the future. And then on top of that, it also just has like decent, like having Rockhead Marowak with Bonemerang and Thick Club. What makes Marowak interesting is that it gets its own item similar to Pikachu called Thick Club, which either, I think it might boost its, it might double its, either doubles or 1.5 times his attack stat, similar to Pikachu. So it just makes him kind of relevant always because of that. So I could definitely see Marowak being good in the future, whether just being a Lightning Rod Pokemon or just a really, really good Trick Room. You might even be able to just go, you might be able to actually go 2v2 speed, 2v2 attack, and like Jolly Nature and make this thing fast enough with under Tailwind to just do some serious damage. I could totally see Marowak becoming viable at some point. And also, the other benefit of Marowak and Pokemon like Pikachu having their own item is the fact that because of item clause in raids, right? You don't have to waste like a choice band or like a life orb or other valuable items you want to put on other Pokemon. You don't use that on Marowak. It just gets its own item. It's not competing over any item slots. You just get to put a free extra powerful item onto it, which is really, really, really relevant. But this one is Lonely Nature. You could go Lonely, Naughty, Adamant, or even Jolly, honestly. 2v2 attack, 252 speed, 25 plus attack, 31 speed is nice if you can do it, 20 plus in all of the bulk, Bonemerang, Earthquake, Stone Edge, Rock Slide, stuff like that is going to be your best bet on a Marowak. And then next up, similar situation, Rhyperior with Lightning Rod. Rhyperior is actually like kind of a really, really interesting Pokemon. It's very, very good against certain fights, like certain like Zapdos and stuff, not really a raid, but like if there's ever like a Zapdos Alpha, similar to how there was a Suicune Alpha raid, this could be really, really good against Zapdos, a Zapdos Alpha raid. I know this is used to counter, I believe, Zapdos in OU, in PvP. Adamant Nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, a very slow Pokemon, but you kind of just hope for the best, I guess. So it's not really gonna have enough bulk or whatever. So you just go 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, Adamant, 31 attack, 31 speed. Having 20 plus in the bulks is super nice on this, I will say. Rock, I'm not familiar with this move. Rock Wrecker. It seems like a Blast Burn type thing for rock Pokemon, which is awesome. Earthquake, Stone Edge, Rock Slide, and then Lightning Rod. The main benefit of Rhyperior would be its ability. And then next up is a lot of people's favorite Pokemon, Flygon. I don't know how Flygon would be good, to be totally honest, but I'm just going to go over the stats. Modest nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, 20 plus, and all the defenses would be nice. Earth power, Draco Meteor. This one's like mixed. I would just go full special probably. Earth power, Draco Meteor, and then whatever coverage, or like I think I might be able to get Tailwind. This thing could be a, you know, Tailwinder or secondary utility Pokemon to some extent. You go Air Slash maybe. I think it gets Tailwind. I could be wrong. Yeah, it does get Tailwind, which is really relevant. But I overall don't see Flygon being amazing anytime soon. Next up, we have Excadrill, which Excadrill can be very, very good in, like, already a decent Pokemon. It probably could be in Core Raiders. Decent Sand Rush / Sand Force Pokemon. And well, honestly, all of Excadrill's abilities are amazing. Sand Rush, doubling its speed in Sand. Sand Force, increasing its damage in Sand. And then, to be fair, Sand Force does specifically only increase the damaging power of ground, rock, and steel type moves by 30%. That is important. And then Mold Breaker. Mold Breaker is a fantastic ability. Being able to Earthquake through like Levitate Mons or just having to ignore abilities is just so powerful. So Excadrill definitely can be good in current raids right now, especially if it's a Tyranitar raid where you set sand yourself, or if you're in permanent sand. This one is Lonely. This is a full physical attacker. As you can tell by its stats, 135 attack, 88 speed. You want to go Lonely, Adamant, or Naughty. 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, and 20 plus in all of the defenses. You want to have your Earthquake, your Iron Heads, your Rock Slides. I wouldn't go Dig. Dig would be slotted out for something else here. But these three moves will do a ton of work. And then your ability is going to depend on what raid you're fighting. Next up is Hippowdon, another Pokemon that I have actually already used in the past for certain raids. I have a different Hippo I'll show you guys in a quick sec in my PC. This one is full damage and speed, which I have not seen. With the 47 speed stat, it's kind of rough, but it's a pretty powerful Pokemon. It's another sand setting Pokemon, so you want to run this similar to Tyranitar on a sand team for certain raids if sand is viable. You want to go Lonely. I'd probably go Adamant on this, or even just like a plus defense nature if it's relevant for the raid, if you'll actually live. 252 attack, 252 speed. You could go HP. I'll show you mine in a quick sec, my defensive one. 31 attack, 31 speed. This one's Earthquake, Sand Tomb, Crunch, and then mostly it's just there to set up sand. I think I have a different Hippo I can show you guys as well. We're almost done as well. You can see we're down to flying and normal types left. So I have a Hippo over here that is Careful nature. It's a specially defensive Hippo, so it allows it to tank both types of attacks, defensive and defensive. Careful, and then mine is 25 or 2v2 HP, 2v2 special defense, and then 25 plus in the defenses, 25 plus attack. And this one's turbo setup. I don't know if I would fully recommend this, but mine is Earthquake, Yawn, and this one doubles like a PvP Pokemon as well. But I would probably do similar things, but then switch over to like Rock Slide or Stone Edge or other like offensive or better utility moves here. You could also go Assault Gear on Hippo. You could go Careful, set Sand, go Assault Gear. Like you could become really unkillable on a Hippo in certain raids. And then we have Nidoking and Nidoqueen. So Nidoking is a modest, special attacker. You need to have Sheer Force on this thing. That is super important. So make sure if you're going Nidoking, I do recommend going special attack. And you can go physical, but I'd recommend special because of the Sheer Force, because of its moveset. So you end up just making this a really niche, interesting typed Pokemon. Poison Ground, modest, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, 20 plus in defense would be nice, but pretty frail. Earth Power, Ice Beam, Flamethrower with Sheer Force. Fourth move could be slotted in. Maybe like Sludge Bomb for stab would be nice. Could be a pretty powerful niche Pokemon in the future if the typing presents itself. Next up is Nidoqueen. Unlike Nidoking, I could see Nidoking being decent. I don't see Nidoqueen being that good in any raids anytime soon. It's just too slow. It doesn't do enough damage. It's more of a bulky Pokemon. Maybe there's some bulky fight where it's relevant, but this one, if you're curious, for reference, is modest nature, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then 20 plus in all the defenses. Earth Power, you'd probably go Earth Power, Sludge Bomb. Maybe you're using Venoshock strats, so it makes it good. Ice Beam, and then some sort of utility move over here with Sheer Force once again, but I don't see Nidoqueen becoming relevant anytime soon. All right, next up, we have a few flying type Pokemon to talk about. First things first is Braviary. Admittedly, I think Braviary's main usage would come from running Defiant, aka Hidden Ability Access Braviary, against some Intimidate lead raids and Intimidate ads. This one is Sheer Force, but which could also be good for its own reasons, but I would expect Defiant to be the main reason you would want to run a Braviary. Braviary is an interesting Pokemon. It actually has a really nice attack stat of 123 and decent enough speed of 80, so it could have a place on a flying type team as a physical attacker in raids in the future. There's just not many raids where you need a flying type attacker at the moment. So this one is Adamant. It would be 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, and you'd rock something like Brave Bird. And then honestly, all three of the other moves are probably TBD. I don't even know, maybe like a Tailwind as like a nice little utility backup, but yeah, there is Tailwind there. Everything else would probably depend on the raid. I know this thing can learn, like, I think superpower it can learn, which honestly would be quite good. You can learn close combat. You probably go close combat. You would go like CC, Brave Bird, and then whatever else you could possibly need for that raid. Next up is Togekiss. Togekiss is a very powerful Pokemon, or it can be, rather. You would definitely go Serene Grace. This one happens to be Hustle, so ignore that. You would go Serene Grace on it because it's better. You don't need the Hustle, it just lowers your accuracy, and you don't care about the physical attack boost. Togekiss is a bulky, special attacking, normal flying type Pokemon, as you can see. So it goes modest, 2v2 attack, 2v2 speed, and then you would want 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then the 20 plus in the defenses is relevant. You would go like Hyper Voice, Air Slash, Flamethrower, Shockwave. Honestly, decent coverage here. Could be a good Pokemon in the future, but nothing currently needs Togekiss. Next up is Rufflet. This is an interesting one. I respect the Rufflet here. I think this is for an Eviolite sort of Rufflet build. I don't know exactly, to be totally honest. This might have just been an extra offensive, like utility style Pokemon sent to me by Jed, so I'm not even going to cover that one, honestly. We're going to go Staraptor. Adamant Staraptor. Staraptor is a very good Pokemon with really good DPS. Really good coverage with close combat, stab double edge, stab Brave Bird. Staraptor is probably the best flying type out of these four, maybe this or Togekiss. This thing can be a menace. If you ever need a fast, strong, flying normal type, this thing's probably your best bet, honestly, with the Reckless ability powering up its Brave Bird and Double Edge. Like, this is a very powerful Pokemon. Adamant nature, 252 attack, 252 speed, has enough speed at 100 plus 120 attack. Like, it has the perfect stats for raids, honestly. And then once again, this move pool and ability is the perfect setup. That is flying types done with. All that's left now is a few normal types, and normal types have a weird spot in raids because normal types aren't exactly known for doing fast, crazy DPS, so they're usually going to be utility Pokemon. So let's go ahead and go through these. We have except for Lickilicky to be here, this is probably an Explosion Mon, I would guess. Yep, that's where Lickilicky shines, being a plus attack nature, lonely, naughty, or adamant. It doesn't even need, like, you're just trying to get off an explosion on this thing before dying. That's this thing's job. If you don't know, Lickilicky is the hardest hitting explosion Pokemon in PokeMMO. It's a normal type Pokemon with 85 attack, which isn't great, but it's kind of the best you have. But it has stab on the explosion. It's the highest, like, stab explosion normal type with the highest attack that we have in the game. So if explosion ever becomes meta for a certain raid, keep an eye out for Lickilickys. Next up is a cow, a Miltank, built defensively, 2v2 HP, 2v2 defense, impish nature, 25 plus in all the defenses, 25 plus, 20 plus hopefully in attack. Miltank is shockingly fast. It's like 100 base stat speed, so make sure to get that 25 plus speed. Don't sleep on the speed stat for the cow. And this would just be for a like stalled out fight. I think this could be good. Once again, if Heal Bell ever becomes useful in raids, I could see this becoming a really useful utility Pokemon. Having Whirlpool to trap things if that's ever relevant. Seismic Toss is nice consistent damage. If you can stop this thing from being killed and get it tanky enough, I could see it being okay, but nothing right now. Clefairy is a really interesting one, actually. Eviolite Clefairy. This could be good. Eviolite Clefairy with Friend Guard. If there ever is some hyper utility normal type Mon, it's probably Clefairy. If Fairy type ever gets added, Clefairy / Clefable, Friend Guard Mons were good against the anniversary event. Like, it was like kind of one of the first like boss battles back in 2022, I believe, 2023. I think it was 2022. There was like a fight where you would have like Chanseys and Blissies and Clefairies and have like Friend Guard and use that. But this one is Impish, if I recall correctly. Impish nature, 252 HP, 252 defense, 20 25 plus in all the defenses is what you would want. And then the attack shouldn't, that really, like, attack and special attack honestly shouldn't matter. You just want 25 plus in all the defenses and then a decent speed stat. And then it has a bunch of utility mons. Friend Guard, reducing damage done to allies, like just overall in general. Very powerful ability in raids if you can get things bulky enough. Having double screens, light screen and reflect. You would put Eviolite on this to double its middling defenses to actually make it pretty tanky, or 1.5 or whatever Eviolite. It's either 1.5 or 2 times. Heal Pulse to help heal your teammates. Helping Hand. The only problem is that it doesn't have Prankster. It doesn't have like speed, so that's like the biggest problem you run into with Clefairy. It moving after everything is a big problem. Next up is Slacking. I would love to see a raid where Slacking is good. I could see something where like Adamant, Giga Impact, just full one big attack, do enough damage to make it relevant. Could be good at something, but we're not there yet. It does have the Truant ability, obviously, so Slacking is an insanely powerful Pokemon on paper, but it only gets 1 attack. But in all honesty, a lot of Pokemon only get 1 attack in raids anyway because they die afterwards. So I could see Slacking being good at something in the future. Next up is a Snorlax. This, I don't know how Snorlax could be good at raids or what its current usage is. This honestly might have just been like a utility Pokemon he sent me, so maybe it's just not even worth covering. But that, for better or for worse, is every single raid Pokemon that was sent to me by the best raider within PokeMMO, in my personal opinion. And I went over all of them, and I hope you guys found it helpful. Alrighty, that was quite a long video, wasn't it? I hope that it had enough useful information to be worth your guys' time. I know some of those raid Pokemon were more useful than others. Some were crucial, some were very important. Even some of the more experimental niche ones could be really, really good in the upcoming very, very soon future. But I hope that you guys just build yourself a Sun team and a Fighting team. Those are the 2 most important ones used at 90% of raids at the current time. But it wouldn't surprise me if Rapid changes Tom to raids this year. I think in 2025, it wouldn't surprise me. This is not confirmed, but it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a big update in the summertime regarding raids, whether permanently releasing them or changing them or adjusting them in some way. They've been constantly adjusting raids, constantly changing them, trying to get them tweaked to be a permanent endgame PvM feature in PokeMMO for quite a while now. And you might be sitting around wondering, Patrouski, what are you going to do with all of those Pokemon? I don't need all of those Pokemon. So what I plan to do, and I don't have it fully sorted yet, but what I plan to do is I'm going to put as many Pokemon as I don't need over in the prize box. And I'm going to start doing a few giveaways here and there on stream, upcoming for shiny ratings, for fashion contests, for events that I already hold, as well as for just like shiny hunting alongside me. I would love to in the future start giving away like a random Pokemon, rolling doing like random.org and rolling like 1 through 60. And if you get if you happen to get a live shiny on my stream, I would love to like give you one of these Pokemon or give back to the community in that way, because I just don't need all of these. So if you want to come win some free things, I don't like shouting out giveaways. I don't like talking about giveaways. If I do them, I usually do them in secret or in private. I do not want people to subscribe to my channel or watch my streams or watch any of my content just for the hope of giveaways. If you ever come into my stream and say, hey, are you doing a giveaway today? I'm probably gonna time you out. I'm not gonna engage with that. I don't want people watching me just for giveaways. If you want to watch my content and then earn some free stuff on the side, and so I can actually give back to the community, that's amazing. I don't want people to watch my content just for giveaways. But if you made it this far in the video, hopefully you actually enjoyed it. And if you liked my content, it means the world to me. Like the video to let me know, dislike if not, subscribe to the channel for daily PokeMMO videos, follow me on Twitch, links down below for streams Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. ET, Discord's down below, which is a really amazing community with tons of help for people trying to build raid teams, or especially like trying to find people to do raids with during the actual event seasons, or hopefully when raids get permanently released. And if you want to go above and beyond and support me, YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, and PayPal/Venmo donations are absolutely crucial, as well as getting Factor 50% off. It should be linked down below, at least for the month of March in 2025. If you're watching this later on, that sponsorship might be over, but Factor is honestly the best way to support the channel. It's so powerful. It's ridiculous. It's the best way to support me, and you also get 50% off of some amazing food, which is really, really, a good timing in this economy. And I really like Factor. I really believe in Factor. It's basically a little meal kit service where you can get nice, nutritionally dense, prepared meals sent to your door. You pop them in the microwave for 2 minutes. You get them done. You get them ready to eat. If you have a fast lifestyle, if you're self-employed like me, you can go ahead and use Factor to save yourself time, stress, energy, save time to go to the grocery store, save gas money, save time on cooking, which can be tremendously time-consuming, and also save time on dishes. Me and my wife use Factor all the time if we know we're going to have a busy work week coming up or just have a lot of stuff on our schedule, so we don't have to worry about another thing, aka planning out nutritionally dense, good meals to keep us fueled for those busy weeks. So check out Factor, link below, 50% off your first order. It's a really, really nice deal, and you can't really go wrong. If you want to cancel your order after the first week, super understandable, but just signing up for the first week, 50% off, it's hard to, you got to at least try it out. I recommend it. It's not for every lifestyle, and I'm always super honest about that. If you have a lot of time, if you enjoy cooking, Factor might not be for you, which is super understandable. But if you want to try it out, go ahead and check it out. Link in the description. But that's going to be it for me. I think that's everything. If I miss anything, let me know in the comments politely. And I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you have wonderful raids. I wish you the best of luck and have a fun time playing PokeMMO. That's what's most important. Hey, thank you so very much for watching until the very end of the video. That means the world to me. And if your name is listed here, you're the reason I'm able to do this in the first place by going above and beyond and supporting the channel via YouTube memberships and Twitch Primes. Thank you so much. Have a great day.